Used to seeing you. Senator Sorensen and Peterson. If there's any other former electeds. Oh, your mom's was. She's always behind my back. She's on my back. How are you, Wayne? It's gonna be a Paul between us today. We're always whispering and getting in trouble. And now you're over there. We're all in the swords. We're out of our assigned seats. Well, I'm sorry to keep folks waiting, but we have a large crowd and we're trying to accommodate. I feel bad. If we had known, we would have certainly gotten like one of the chambers, the House or Senate, but I did not know. So we apologize for those who don't have a direct seat in the bed. Well, we're gonna call to order. We have a quorum. I'm gonna let you go through. Have you done the count of who is here?
Yep.
Do you want to do a quick roll call, please?
Sure. So here in the conference room, we do have Lieutenant Governor. We do have Representative Baumback, Mr. Wayne Emsley, Jeff Tashner, Dave Craig, and Mr. Bill Overly. And then virtually, we do have Senator Townsend, Director Kate, Secretary DeMatteis, Commissioner Navarro, Secretary Geisenberger, Representative Ramon, and Denise Allen. Did I miss anyone?
And Lieutenant Governor, apologize. I was at the yard waste site helping people empty their cars. Planned on being there, but I'm muddy and wet, so I'm staying covered up so nobody sees me. I'm kind of a mess.
But thank you for that, and sincerely for those. I know it's been a very traumatic, difficult week, and so thank you for your service.
No
You are
worries.
excused for not being appropriately dressed, but present, and so we appreciate it. And
if I have to open the screen to show me, I will. If not, I'll rather not. It's not a pretty sight.
Well, anyway, we appreciate that. And anybody else? See, you look fine. You look fine. Anybody else that we missed? All right. Well, wonderful. Well, we thank you all. And again, we have full quarters. And again, we certainly would have accommodated with a larger facility if we had known, but we're here.
The good news is, and if I may, just take a moment, because I want to make sure that we are as transparent as possible. The benefits office will be relocating and moving from the current location that we're in and where we're all sitting today. The last official meeting that we will hold at this location will be the State Employee Benefits Committee meeting. That will be Monday, August 21st. Our next retiree health benefits advisory subcommittee meeting, the meeting of this group, is scheduled for August 24th. That meeting will be held at the Delaware Department of Insurance offices, which are just a stone's throw from where we're sitting right now. But I just want to make sure folks are aware of that. We will most likely, should this group schedule additional meetings, because right now we do not have any additional meetings scheduled past that August 24th date. But we will most likely be holding those meetings as well at the Delaware Department of Insurance. Their conference room is slightly larger than this, so we will be able to accommodate about 100 individuals, including committee members and members of the public. All right, so just wanted to share that, and we do apologize for those of you that unfortunately may be standing during today's meeting.
Yes, and you got it. And again, for those who are present, I know we've taken a sign-in sheet too, correct? Correct. So if somebody feels the need, particularly those in the other room or the hall, this is the nurse first. I don't want anybody falling down or passing out. We really would like for you to at least sign in. That will certainly count as an acknowledgement for your attendance today. And so we really appreciate that. So with that, what I'd like to do is take a look at our July 20th minutes. And see if anyone has a motion when you're ready for approval of minutes, and I would need a second. He's good. You got it. Okay. Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second that the July 20th minutes be approved. All in favor, signal by saying aye, unmute yourselves. Aye, voting members. Any nays? Any nays? I know Nancy's back there laughing. Any names? Hearing none, no abstentions. Great.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I propose a motion of moving item 6 before item 5 today? I think we know that at the last meeting, sorry, if that's a motion, I need to wait for a second. to speak
Yes,
on
you
it.
sure do. Okay, you want to move public comment before,
The discussion and other business.
okay, if we can, if that, hopefully that won't be a minute. Yeah, we can do that. Give us a second. So we have a motion and a second, if you all can hear. That we move public comment prior to number 5, so number 6 before 5, which would be our discussion and other business.
And the reason I think at the last meeting, we found that there was a lot of good information we heard from the public, but we didn't have the opportunity to act on it. Given we're in the last 2 meetings, I think, and especially because we have an extra hour, I think that would be more beneficial.
Great, okay, wonderful.
Could I
Okay.
add that we put some sort of time limit on that public comment?
Yeah, we will. We usually do, and I don't think we won't need too much.
Okay.
So, great, I'm channeling positivity today, so I think not. All right, having stated that, can I have we have a motion and a second, all in favor of changing the agenda, signal by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
nays? No nays. Okay, and no abstentions, so that stands as approved. Before jumping into this, I want to see if my co-chairs, Senator Townsend or Senator Bombach have anything to say, because we are going to go right into some of our discussion items. We do know that a member has at least one motion. We will get to that motion. But I think before getting to that, we really want to have a discussion, and that's on a couple of recommendations. I want to mention that before turning to my co-chairs, Representative Bombach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my main thing I'd like to say at the start is, we have 2 meetings to complete our report, and I think our report to me has a narrower scope. I think it's focused solely on input for the upcoming request for proposal, RFP, for the next round of looking for bids for health insurance. There are things which if we're going to speak up on this, we need to get that in there. There are things that would not go into the RFP. Eligibility changes would not go into the RFP. Plan design would. Which plans we have? Is it a Medicare supplement? Is it what HRA, whatever? That goes into RFP. Whether spousal share changes, what share, whether it's 5%, 10%, 15%, that's not needed for the RFP. And I think if we are worried about time and making sure we make all the decisions we have to for the RFP, we may want to intentionally limit ourselves, be looking at the things today, which would go into the RFP, focused on the plan design. That's my 2 cents there.
For that, and keep in mind, as you state, Senate Bill 29, we're providing broad discussion, broad layout around both retiree healthcare. Because we have said from day one, I say it again, the number one thing we can do is make sure retirees' health, as well as our current employees' health, is critically important. And so, again, as a SEBC, I know gets into those details. We have our cabinet secretaries calling in today as well. And so I think optimistically, let's hope we get design, and perhaps we even get a few things out on eligibility as well today that we've modeled, and funding a little bit. I don't know if Senator Townsend wants to speak or not. I can check. He often signals to me on my phone.
No.
Senator Townsend?
Thank you,
sir.
Lieutenant Governor. I appreciate it. I just echo what Representative Baumback has said. And we'll leave it at that for purposes of moving more directly to items on the agenda.
Okay, all right, so with that, why don't we roll right in? So Faith, I don't know if somebody, Willis Towers, or if you want to jump in with Joanna. We'll pull up item number 3, our recommendations. We've been looking at combinations. For those who perhaps haven't been to our meetings, we're spending a lot of time, like Representative Bombach said, looking at designs, trying to look at eligibility, and certainly, funding and building off what we've heard. So who would like to take the lead with the slides? Joanna, that's why you have red sparkles on today. You need to be bedazzled. We actually, I have to say, for those in this room are not aware, we've got an incredible group of staff who've done a yeoman's job, weekends, hours, their vacation time, modeling, and that's not easy to do. So we appreciate that.
I appreciate that. All right, so moving to slide 2, I'm not presenting anything new. I just want to share that this is really a consolidated chart of all the different items that we've been modeling historically in previous meetings. So one consolidated chart as to the impact of the funding and or the percent of funding, et cetera. So it's consolidated into one chart based on models A, B, and C. So again, nothing new here that we're presenting, just a different view.
Joanne, just one question.
Sure.
Down where it says benefit design, and it talks about similar to Medicare. There, I know at the end, there's it's like a footnote 3, but there's no footnote on the page. And then 2 pages back, there appears to be a footnote talking about what I think similar to is. My question is, what does that mean, similar to? Because throughout the course of the last 16 months, we've heard same as, similar to, and it didn't even tell me anything.
Yeah.
Just want to know the specifics of what that means.
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if he does. I do remember it was a topic of conversation at a previous meeting.
Yeah, and
I think on page 4, you see the footnote that.
yeah, I can take that. and run.
Actually, well, I didn't know if that applied back to 2 pages earlier.
That, and it, generally speaking, yes, Jeff, the answer to the question is it does. If in the appendix section, there is the original slide where we presented those 2 options. And that footnote 3 should still be included in that slide. Let me see if I can remember which slide.
I need to find it. And while she's flipping there too, I think it's important that you highlight the headlines of each of the columns.
Correct.
For those in the room who maybe don't have papers in front of them, and maybe some people have better visual acuity than others. And you mentioned again those dates.
Absolutely. So the individual items are broken down into funding, eligibility, and plan design. And then we're stating the impact to funding in the column after the description. Then we've done it for 3 various models. Model A, which is those hired on or after 1/1/2015.
So hired after 2025.
No, that's
15.
model A and 15.
Okay, oh, I can't even say that.
And then
15. All right.
model
And then
B
225.
is for new hires on or after 1/1/2025.
Right.
And then model C is those that are retired on or after 1/1/2025.
So for most people in this room, this is not affecting most of the people, not all, but
That is
most
correct.
of the people. Just I want to make sure, because this is complicated numbers, can be confusing. So thank you for that.
And I did see tape later, looks like page 13, 14. There is a footnote 3.
Yes.
Okay, continue, Joanna.
Okay, so moving to the next slide. Now we're starting to present combinations. So we've already, in past meetings, we have presented combo 1 and combo 2. However, for combo 2, in this meeting, we're presenting one additional combination, and that's for model C. So at the last meeting, model B was presented for combination 2, which took us to 80%, 80.8% funding in 2052. But if we change the criteria from new hires on or after 1/1/2025 to new retires on or after 1/1/25, it does benefit the state by an additional 3.5, almost 4%. So it increases the funding status to 84.2%. It still impacts the OPEB reduction about the same $14.7 billion over the 30-year period. So does the committee have any questions specifically about model C? And again, the only difference between model C and model B is the hire date versus the retire date. So one impacts new hires, one impacts new retires.
Big difference. Said it's the only difference. It's a big difference.
Yeah. Okay. And then moving to slide 4. We have
Yeah.
2 new combinations. And again, we've modeled these, or get my little cheat sheet.
Get your cheat sheet. You just thought you had this memorized. You and Margaret.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
not.
there was a
Not
time I
data.
probably could have, but we're really getting into more and more options here.
But for those listening, and I know it's like alphabet soup, but right now it affects the majority of. the future
Contrary,
votes.
we opened initial discussions with the subcommittee about this plan design at the July 20th meeting. However, we did not discuss the impacts
Right.
to the unfunded
So
liability.
I have those values today. So again, we're looking at starting with a OEC rate, the rate of favorable at 0.36% for funding, pre-funding OPEB with the additional 1% carve out. And then we're offering a choice between the Medigap supplement low plan, which is similar to Plan L at 85% of state share, which means the retiree would pay 15% of state share. And the other option is a Medigap supplement high plan, which is similar to Plan N as a buyout, with the pensioner's share being 15% of the low plan, plus an additional premium to buy that up. So in using this combination for those hired on or after 1/1/2025, that takes us to a funding status of 67.9%. And changing it for those that retire on or after 1/1/2025, that then increases the funding to 71.5%.
Just a quick question. Can you quantify what the cost of a buyout would be or estimate?
I think that's on a sheet.
have it.
I think that's on a sheet right here.
Estimates, we
Oh.
estimated at it, yeah.
Yeah, so if the subcommittee is so inclined, what we can do here is we can take a pause. There are 2 additional handouts in the materials today. One gives some information on the costs associated with these 2 options. And the other document details the plan design for Plan L and Plan N next to the existing medical supplement plan. So we've got Brian Stitzel from Towers
So
Watson.
probably-
If we could have Brian walk us through those 2
You would like,
documents if you'd like.
what do you all think? Don, Billy?
Well, if we're gonna get to it
Yeah.
eventually, that's fine. I was just curious what
Either way.
that Bella was.
Do it either way.
Let's continue with the options and then do that.
Okay,
Okay.
I think,
you are such a good school teacher. All right, retired. Okay, all right,
Any questions about combination 3 before I move to combination 4?
all right.
Hearing none. Combination 4. Again, having the OEC rate of 0.36% of payroll along with the 1% carve out. So there's your funding and baseline. As far as benefit design, this particular combo offers a choice between Medigap supplemental plan similar to the existing special medical plan or a Medicare Advantage plan similar to the formerly proposed Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield Delaware Freedom Blue PPO. For the Medigap supplement plan, would reduce the state share from 95% to 85%, which in turn means the retiree would pay an additional 10%. And for the Medicare Advantage plan, the state share would remain at 95%, meaning that the retiree would pay 5%. And this particular combination, when we modeled it, we made the assumption that 90% of retirees would enroll in the Medigap plan and 10% would enroll in the Medicare Advantage plan. So again, offering the choice between those, a Medigap or Medicare Advantage. The change went into effect for those hired on or after 1/1/2025. That would increase the funding status to 63.9%, just shy of 64. And then making that change for new retires on or after January 1/2025, that would take us just about to 66% funding.
Great.
Any questions?
Hi, this is Secretary Geisenberger. So I just wanted to clarify. So in the second one on this page, there's no buy-up requirement. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that likely is what accounts for the delta in terms of what impact it has on the funded ratio.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, I realize it's not the entire difference, but that's probably the major difference.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if I could just make a comment on this slide, which is, I think both of these options are viable and worthy of consideration. I do think they still, as you can see, neither gets to, either the goal that this committee set for itself at the last meeting of 80%. And as you know, there was some dissent on whether that should be the target, but my instinct is that both of these would likely get to that with possibly with some modest changes in eligibility going forward for future retirees, with something in terms of the pre-Medicare premium. Although I don't know that that's been modeled yet, but it is something that I would like to see modeled. Because I think if you added those two components, some modest change in eligibility, either something on spousal or taking the 15-year eligibility and bumping it up by, to 25, 22.5, 20, and then put in something that would combine with a increase in the pre-Medicare premium relative to active employees. And I don't know how modest that might be, but I suspect that would, if you added those two components, it probably would get you to the goal. But I'm, not sure because I haven't seen the modeling, but.
Yeah, but thank you for that. Right, and I think we've talked about whether it's future eligibility. Some of us, I know with Dave Crack and I, we've looked at, the pre-fund, changing that a little bit. So I think those are obvious considerations, but thank you. I've been calling you Professor Geisenberger. You're calling in on your vacation, so we hope that you're getting some rest on your time away. Yes, go ahead, Joanna.
I believe my work is done for today.
All right, Representative Overly.
Just one quick question. Is the rate of payroll still on the table for discussion? Because it's.
Everything will be on discussion.
We made it 0.36 through these.
Right.
These combinations.
Right, we had just started with 0.36 as our baseline because that's the current rate that's in the budget now.
Yeah,
It
right.
just to be consistent across, we just kept it.
We kept it that way, but we've asked Joanna, I know with the
Yeah,
others, to look at the amortization.
I'd like to see how that factors out.
And I think we'll have those, I'm gonna talk those slides today, or maybe at the next meeting, we can talk about that.
I think slide 12
Has a little bit
touches
of
on that,
touches on it.
bring it up to 1%, and then there's other ones that bring it up beyond that.
Yeah.
But in isolation, going to 1% is
And it's tough trying to go through these. on
It's
my
hard.
iPhone This morning at 8:30 in the morning, so.
With your eyes, it's a lot, it is a lot of information, that is for sure. So, do we wanna continue, do we wanna jump and look at the plan? What would you suggest? Probably the Willis Towers, probably, why don't we?
We can certainly do that if the subcommittee members are.
To see what we came up
So
with.
is the view that everything under appendix has been provided in the past?
Yes.
So which is why we don't need to go over that right now.
Correct. There's
Okay.
no new content in the appendix slides. That is all previously
Can
presented.
I just point out that it's noted that the next meeting is 3 hours long also from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And as you said, it'll be in the Department of Insurance's office.
Correct. Thank you.
The next slide there.
Yes, yes. So if hearing no objections, we will extend an hour on the back end as opposed to starting the meeting earlier. So we would go from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Delaware Department of Insurance.
Thank you, Commissioner Navarro, for that. Okay, having said that,
Just one question. I know last meeting, we also talked about Medigap Plan G, and we haven't modeled that. Are we gonna model that or not?
and we can talk a little bit about that, and we can talk about F and G. I know from the community, we had a request, an email we received from a member in the community who had a couple of questions. I know Commissioner Navarro, I think, and others perhaps were available. I don't know if this is the best time. What do you suggest, Babe?
That we certainly can go there next. I agree with the Lieutenant Governor. It is our understanding that subcommittee members did receive requests from several members of the public asking for clarity on the current medic fill plan compared to plan F and G.
Since we have modeled L and N, that was a
Correct.
request, so we are trying to be as open and transparent to all requests that we receive and making sure your questions are answered as we get your email.
Yes.
Well, and the reason I ask is I know at the last meeting, I brought up the issue of G
Mhm.
and had talked about modeling it. And I didn't know if that was just something that was still in the planning stages. Because when I got this, quite frankly, and looked at it, I was surprised. I was surprised that G didn't appear anywhere in the model. So I want to know what lies ahead.
All right.
If I,
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I recall, I thought she suggested N as a base
Surrogate,
with a
yeah.
buy-up.
Or the possibility of,
Yeah.
all
That's
three,
what we
right?
were-
Because, I mean, what I saw, quite frankly, when I looked at these was, I'm gonna get them wrong, but, G
And can
being,
you guys hear online, because Jeff is using his input.
I know I'm being uncharacteristic, slide. I think it goes G, N, and L in order from, richest to not as rich. And it just seemed, we picked the low level plan and the mid level plan. I just want to make sure that we look at everything before we make a final recommendation. And I just personally don't feel like we've taken a good look at G yet, and that's why I'm asking.
All right, and I think last time, I think our representative Overly said, I think there was probably an understanding from the team. And it's fine to make that request now for G. I think there was that understanding that we were gonna surrogate in kind of the N for the G. But hearing that request, is there commentary, Joanna, do you have, or WTW, anybody have on G and F? And I know the commissioner might too.
If I may, we have not formally modeled plan F or G for the purposes of the OPEB liability. However, and this is where I would like to ask Willis Towers Watson and the insurance commissioner to chime in. It is our understanding that the only difference between the medic fill plan today, which we have modeled, right, and plans F and G, is that with plan any Medigap plan, so F, G, L, N, private duty nursing is not covered. Under medic fill today, private duty nursing is covered by the medic fill plan at 80% with a 20% coinsurance to the Medicare beneficiary. And the only other difference between medic fill and those Medigap plans is that there are outpatient professional and surgical benefits when incurred out of the country, outside of the US, that are not covered under a standard Medigap plan. So those are actually enhancements to the medic fill plan. So having said that, and this is where I would defer to certainly Joanna and the OPEB actuary, we wouldn't anticipate there to be any meaningful difference in what the modeling would look like for a plan F or G to that which we have already seen with the existing medic fill plan.
Doesn't plan G also not
One at a time to Mr. Wayne.
not pay the first,
Yes,
what,
thank you.
some dollars?
Thank you, Wayne. The only other difference between F and G is that G does have a deductible that F does not.
That's right. So planned, hi, it's Brian Stitzel from WTW. So everything that Faith said was accurate. On the non-US benefits or coverage abroad, MedicFill does cover services for both emergencies and non-emergencies. F, NG, and N, since we're also talking about L and N, F, G, and N all have a foreign travel emergency benefit, so they would also pick up coverage for emergencies abroad, similar to the fact that MedicFill covers it. They would not cover non-emergencies other than some slight nuances where Medicare is actually picking up stuff due to proximity, but now we're getting super in the weeds there. She was right in saying that private duty nursing is not covered by any traditional Medigap letter labeled plan. You're right. Somebody pointed out that the difference between F and G is that G does not cover the Part B deductible, which I think is $286 in 2023. It's a number that generally goes up every year, but that is the only difference between F and G. And like I said about N covering foreign travel emergency benefits, L does not cover foreign travel emergency benefits. And just for complete clarity there too, N and L do not cover the Part B deductible, similar to G. And plans F and G cover what are called Part B excess charges, which are basically charges where a provider does not accept Medicare, so they're allowed to do a slight level of balance billing to the member. Plans F and G cover those excess charges. Plans N and L do not. And then everything else is generally the same. All of their services are generally the same between F, G, and L, with the one caveat that L, while L covers the majority of other services, it comes with a 25% coinsurance, meaning coinsurance paid by the participant, 75% paid by the plan to an out-of-pocket max. So that's sort of high level between Medicville and F, G, L, and N. And I know that the chart here only shows L and N.
May I?
Go ahead.
Brian, if you can let me know if I'm on track or way off track, please let me know. And for Mr. Tachner, while they modeled the L and N where L is the low and that's the default, and then the member would have a cost share to pay up for the N, I believe the way they've modeled it is assumed that nobody pays up. And is that correct or not? Correct?
Yeah, let the de facto it's the same, because if you think about it, maybe it makes sense to flip to the retiree cost comparison file. It's cost neutral. Said another way, it's cost neutral, right? Because if you're subsidizing 85% of the cost of L, and if you want to enroll in N, you're paying the same contribution as L, plus the full value difference between the two plans, it's cost neutral to the state.
So the reason I asked that is, Mr. Tachner, having G in there also modeled will have no difference to the model, because they're assuming that either it's not used at all or the extra that the member pays covers the state's cost for that. So the model results would be unchanged, whether it includes L and N or whether it includes L, N, and G.
That's right. If
And
G is
it's all
treated as a
helpful,
buy-up, just like
I'm
L
a
is.
visual person, so hearing all this is one thing,
You want to
but
see it?
seeing it on
Okay.
paper
Yeah.
is
Right.
incredibly helpful.
Right.
I think, correct me if I'm,
Guys in murder, go ahead.
Yeah. I think where the difference might be is if you modeled N with a buy-up to G. Is that correct, Faith?
Yeah, and that's what we had talked about.
We
the
had
last
talked
time.
about
Yeah.
maybe doing
Right.
that possibly.
I
that's-
think Representative Baumback is absolutely right that it's not going to make any difference in doing that model of L to G, but perhaps what would help the conversation from Jeff's perspective is to see what happens if it's an N buying up to G.
And I know the last
Does
time
does that make sense?
Yes,
it does. Last time I actually acknowledged that I had been asking the wrong question of Brian, because I've been asking about modeling the G or
You
modeling the
had, yeah,
Medicare.
so you,
And what I said
it's
this
what you
time,
phrased it.
based on everything I heard from people, it made me realize that it was the buy-up would have an impact, and that's what I was trying to look so we could see how
To see what that
that
is.
would play out. Not just for the entire plan, but for me, it's for the individual future retiree.
Yes.
Because what I'm looking at is what this sheet says about Medicville and what their current cost obligation would be, and what this sheet says about the model plans. And what I'm seeing as, I know Brian said cost neutral, and it may be cost neutral to the plan, but I don't see this being cost neutral to the retiree.
Right, well, what is
No,
that?
absolutely not.
Retiree.
Yeah.
Right,
It-
and the
it-
coverage too, we, and I don't know if Commissioner Trinidad and Navarro wanted to chime in on anything or not, to perhaps a little bit of that understanding of the coverage.
So that I don't repeat Brian's alphabet soup there. I know it's really hard to kind of follow that without seeing it, like to Jeff's point, in a visual manner. Tom Pledgey had sent me 2 questions, and the one I think Brian just answered generally. So the second question that he had sent, and I'll just read it to the folks here, is why do the rates for individual Medicare supplement or Medigap plans vary by age, gender, and other factors? And I think this is important because we're looking at a commercial plan versus a non-commercial plan. And so there's all these variables that aren't necessarily in MedicFill or a similar plan. So in general, the individual health insurance market utilizes a more granular rating factors than the employer-sponsored insurance market. So this helps reduce the risk of individuals only buying health insurance when they are most likely to need, or known as anti-selection, or the sickest of the sick will use this, which increases the overall cost of health insurance, similar to the under 65 individual ACA, Affordable Care Act market, or Medigap plans. They vary by age to reduce this potential anti-selection risk. So Medigap plans also use other rating factors like gender and tobacco usage as actuarial studies, and they demonstrate a correlation between these factors and higher utilization of care. So under 65 individual insurance plans also use these factors when we allow. But as a comparison, the Medicare Advantage plans do not vary member premiums for these factors because federal revenue to health plans, or because of that federal revenue to health plans, which represents the vast majority of revenue for MA, or Medicare Advantage. So it's risk adjusted for age and gender. And lastly, as a comparison, the employer-sponsored group market generally does not use specific age rating because there are already restrictions in place to keep employers from jumping in and out of coverage. So they call it I call it adverse selection. So we knew that was what would happen. Just talking a little bit about the ACA when it first started, because the sickest of the sick would purchase plans, use it, and then get out of it. So they'd only pay for it for a short period of time. So that's the difference. And I know not everyone had a chance to see Mr. Pledgey's questions, but again, he asked specifically, why do the rates for individual Medicare supplement Medigap plans vary by age, gender, and other factors?
Thank you. And again, we try to answer questions that come in that we think the commission members here should hear. And so we appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that information. And again, these are annual costs on the screen too. Go ahead.
So another question for Brian. Brian, can you step us through the 3 middle rows? The state share percent to me seems to be the retiree share, not the state share. Is
Yeah,
that both in percent and dollars? Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just how it's been communicated in terms of percent, but you're right. The 5% and the 15% is what the retiree pays to enroll in those options.
Or in some cases 15% or 15
Plus
plus
a
something
buy.
of this area. And then as Madam Chair said, every figure on this table is an annual per participant. Is
That's
that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Other comments or questions? So Joanna, you don't get off. Your work is not done today. Jeff, we're gonna keep working. So Joanna, the work never ends, does it? All right, shall we then go forward into looking, if you want to comment a little bit more on any bit of the plans, what do you think? Faith, what would you like to do? You want to move on a little bit more? So anybody have questions on any of the details with plans? Because if not.
So can I just, if I may,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to narrate the bottom row. And
Of what? Because
of
nobody can know
the table
what
that's
you're
up on
doing.
the screen.
Okay.
Okay. And so I'd say this is the 10th percentile. That's our code for those individuals by looking at past experiences, those individuals with the lowest cost health expenses for a typical year within I'll say the most healthy 10% or the least expensive 10%. Then there's the average in the middle, the 50th percentile, and then the 10% with the highest cost, the experiences there. So we, oftentimes you only look at the average, and that I think is really important. I'm really glad that we've had this kind of data and analysis given to us. So if we look at the three, and actually, I think it'd be better if it was done the medic fill, then the N, then the L, which I would call high, medium, and low in that order. So for the healthiest, the medic fill is the least expensive. And then N, which is known as medium, and then L is the lowest, and that's mainly because the premiums for L are lower than N there. For the average person, here you have the same thing with the FG, medic fill, whatever you want to call it, or high being the least expensive for the average person. And then the medium one is the most expensive, and then the low one is in the middle. And here's, I think, that where the high, medium, and low comes from. When you look at the 90th percentile, when you look at those who have the highest costs, then the lowest cost plan, the L, has the highest cost, because this is for that subset of the population who have the highest medical costs. With plan L, across the three different choices of plans, that would give the highest cost for the retiree. And then N would give you a medium amount, and the current medic bill, which current retirees have, would have still the lowest cost. So that's, I think, that bottom line is a good summary line, and don't have to worry too much about the math above it, because it's all filters down to the bottom line.
Couldn't have said it any better.
Thank you. It's all about the bottom line. How about it? All right. Thank you. Might call you professor now.
Maybe a teaching assistant.
Yeah. And we could use some of those, right? And it's right. All right. So from here, are there other things you want to pull out that we need to discuss? I know for future ideas, I don't want to skip around. Do we want to do these or with the motion? Does everybody have these or not?
They do have that was included in your meeting
For everybody,
materials
yes.
this morning.
There's no attribution on this. Where did this come from?
From us, this was us asking for.
It came from us
By
and
David
David
Craft and I.
Okay.
Actually, Joanna prepared that as a follow-up from the discussion on July 20th, just to provide more context
Right.
around that option as it was presented in
We're
July.
talking about that. So we have the big plan. So, all right, so we have a few options here. We have items. What do you think? Well, do I call the motion or go to these? What do you think? Highlight these. We're gonna highlight a couple quick items that were included in your packet. If you want to mention those, Joanna, we'll just highlight those because they can be considered. We're trying to capture with cast a net wide and far, and I know Dave Track, if you want to make any comments too on the amortization that we were looking at, if you want to pull it up, or Joanna, if you want to start. Everybody had this handout from today, the OPEB overview, and then the back. Remember, 3 legs of the stool, and I know today, like you said, there is, trying to get back to the future consideration of those who perhaps are addressing the RFP, which does indeed address design. So we don't want to go down the river too far on the canoe today. And we certainly can't. We know our Secretary of O&M and others in finance have a role in this. But we had requested perhaps a look at amortization on the leg of the funding. We've got the 1% funding. There had been discussion around looking at the 0.5 and what would happen over a period of time. Obviously, the members of the General Assembly and the governor's office would have, and certainly finance and O&M, always implications for the budget, which we heard before, but thank you for doing this. And so I don't know if Dave or Joanna who wants to go first. Since you prepared it, maybe you chime in and then Dave talk.
So this was kind of where we started, where OPEB started,
Right.
very briefly, and then taking us straight into the model that was presented at the July 20th
Right,
meeting.
and keep in mind, Senate Bill 29, we recognize our role. This, takes it a little bit further, but it is addressing the issues of long-term, health coverage with our retirees and the OPEB liability. And again, we're trying to throw out as many things at the wall to see what sticks and lands where we might have options to share with the governor and members of the legislature.
So again, it's the history of OPEB, very brief history of OPEB. the narrative of the model that was presented on July 20th. And then the benefits of the funding. So looking at the chart on the second page, this is what the schedule looks like. So it breaks it down by fiscal year, what the expected benefit costs were, contributions paid by retirees, as well as the contributions paid by the state based on the model that's presented on the first page. And then the last column talks about the trust deposit. So I've added an additional paragraph here talking about ADC, which is the actuarially defined contribution. So right now, when we're talking about funding OPEB, we're doing a pre-funding, which is the 0.36%, and then we're doing the pay-go funding, which is 9.21% of payroll to pay for benefits for today. So at the point that you reach ABC, those two prior buckets or separate buckets really become one. You're just paying the ADC to cover benefits because benefits are now being paid by the trust. So that's where 2042 really comes into play. If you look at 2041, we're looking at potential net benefits of 660 million. Retirees would be contributing almost 91 million. The state at this point, again, only based on this combination presented, it would increase up to 1.1 billion. So that is the final year that the state would have to make such a large contribution. And then the next year, 2042, meaning all benefits will be paid from the OPEB trust. So there's still going to be contributions by retirees as their state share. There'll be contributions by the state, which is really the ABC. And the rest would start coming from the OPEB trust part.
And again, this is just like a model thrown out. And Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything there. I know we were looking at the pension retirement, how they did it there.
Right, so this is the 0.5%.
Gradually increasing.
So if we were to drop it to 0.25, it would be lower and push out the 2042 impact. I would assume. But I think this is a good indication of what this extra funding, payroll funding, is going to help us. To increase above the 0.36.
Right. And one of the mechanisms, and I know certainly we're not going to be able to get into the weeds on it today,
Right.
but it would sure be nice to be able to present for consideration.
And don't be concerned with the negative number you see in 2042, because that's how we want it to be. And that's how the pension fund has been for decades. We have a negative cash flow each year because the trust is paying.
So if you would say that louder, because I'm not sure everybody can hear it. Inside, you're divorced from screaming at that Phillies game last night. No,
But I said the negative cash flow number in the year 2042 is a good thing. That's where now the trust is paying the benefits using the assets that have built up through years, and the pension fund has been like that for decades.
Right.
It's a negative cash.
So it's not just using the assets, it's also using the earnings on the assets.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So consolidate less, and I think that's the key. We haven't really talked about the actuarially defined contribution a whole lot.
Right.
Because when we've looked at all these other options, we've never gotten to that point.
Right.
With the combination, including the pre-funding, we're actually getting to ABC, whether it's 2042 or some year,
Right.
Thereafter, and that's where the state starts to see the significant savings.
And we recognize, and as the secretary reminded us often, around there are certainly some budget implications for it. But I think when Dave and myself and some others were talking, we're trying to just come up with options, right? And where it had worked so well with the pension, to at least give it consideration, representative really.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, Dave. This modeling represents 0.5%.
Yes.
And I guess, and I'm not sure how you would even project it, but did you use a flat discount rate on this? I mean, discount rate is going to impact this, isn't it? You'd have to ask.
Joanne.
Yeah, I don't know what assumptions you used on discount rate.
Let's me check my handy dandy little chart. So I'll ask that Margaret confirm, but I believe that we went to the 7% discount rate really quickly. So the first year or two might not have been at the 7, but it was there after.
What is it, Margaret?
Yes, that's correct. As we fund the trust, then we can move the discount rate up to our expected earnings on the trust.
And put that in people speak for the people on here who are not retired, who are retirees that taught maybe elementary education, in the area of language arts. It's not our math people. What does that mean? How do you explain that? Or Dave, do you?
Well, yeah, I'll try. As I don't speak actuarial. So when you're funding the plan, if you're not fully funding it, you can only use a investment rate that's lower than what you normally would if you're funding the plan. So right now, we're not funding the plan, so we have to use a rate much lower than the 7% is what the pension board has said is what we assume we can return every year, 7%. So it sounds like in a couple of years, this model would go to the 7%, which gives us more assets earnings in the plan, but will help out the costs.
So something to look at. Like I said, we were just trying to brainstorm another thing to put on the wall to recommend. Yeah.
Joanna, I just want to be real clear here because I'm not at this point. The column trust deposit. In 2023, that 56.5 million. What is that, the 1% carve out plus 0.36 or what is it?
Margaret, yes, I believe it is the 1% plus the point.
No, it wouldn't. What?
Plus,
It's 2020.
plus the 0.5%.
Right, so in 2023, we didn't have the 1%, we had the carve out. I'm sorry, the OEC rate, the 0.36%.
So, okay,
We
so
did not have the carve out,
in FY23?
right?
Right.
We're
No, we did have the 1%. The governor put it in for
We
fiscal.
put it, not
23.
fiscal year 24, this is fiscal year
No,
23.
he put it in for fiscal 23 that just ended,
Yeah.
and we put it in for 24.
Right.
Oh, you're right. It wasn't,
It-
you're right,
it
it was
had-
put
it
budget
hadn't been
differently,
in-
but you're right.
Right.
Great
It
secretary,
had not
guys,
been
and we're-
enacted. Yeah, it was in the budget, but it had not been enacted as a statutorily the way it was for fiscal year 24.
So it's 1% plus the 0.36.
So, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joanna, this chart is showing 0.36, 1% carve out plus adding 0.5% against payroll until it gets to what number? What percent?
Until we hit ADC.
So we had
Until it
ADC.
reaches ADC. So
Right.
what that does is it creates, I mean, you can see what it means from a funding perspective and the challenge I think it will present for future general assemblies and future governors without any plan design change of, really 8 times the contribution needing to be made in 20 years to get to the kind of point where you've fully funded this. So, I think it's a tremendous challenge for the General Assembly and budget directors. And, obviously the question is, will they do it? I mean, it's nice to put it in a chart, but the history has been, as we've all discussed, is that General Assemblies in the past have had rules that were in the code. And then the first time you hit a bad budget year, someone says, well, we can't afford to do that. And then they don't do it. And this, while I believe that the 0.36% and the 1% are very achievable and can be done year after year after year, I'm dubious that if you add on an additional 0.5% over and over and over, year after year after year, I'm very dubious that General Assemblies will continue to do that year after year after year, especially given the history. I think it'll be a huge challenge for them.
Could I continue with my question?
Yeah, well, I think he wanted to say something.
No, no,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Ray, go
quickly.
ahead.
So again, going back to the trust deposit column, the 56.5, we now agree is the 1% carve out plus 0.36.
Right.
What is the 60.0?
So remember, it's 1% of the prior year's general fund budget. So that's going to incrementally increase,
Okay, so it's 1% carve out plus what?
plus the 0.36% of payroll.
Okay. All right. How about the 65.7? That is FY25.
So this whole column is based on that plus. So you gotta remember too, you've got some differences between what is being paid by retirees and the state compared to the benefits that are being paid out
Yeah,
as well.
what I'm trying to nail down, what's not clear to me is. I know, or I'm assuming now that the 1% carve out goes all the way down the column. Correct?
Mhm.
Okay. What about the OEC as we go down the column? What happens to it? Does it stay at 0.36 or does it?
No.
increase?
No,
No, this is what we're
because
looking
it's
at,
based on
0.5.
these three.
Yeah, and we can
items.
come
So
back and have
it
another
increases
conversation
incrementally
on
by
this.
0.5% each year.
Okay, so then in FY 25, it would be 1% carve out plus 0.86.
No, the first year it goes to 0.5. The second year it increases by another 0.5% to go to 1%.
Okay, so FY 26 would be 1% plus the 1% OEC. Okay, thank you, thank you.
And we can go into more detail later. I mean, I know today we have other conversations, but we want to get folks seeing this now because if we're gonna write something and make a recommendation in the report. And again, that legislators perhaps have recommendations, perhaps have a little menu of selections of options that they might want to consider. That is a goal, right? Our goal is options. Okay, Representative Ballmer?
No, I'm good. I mean, thank you for presenting this. I think it does help us see progression. It does not show the growth of the budget, for instance. So while it looks like, oh, that's very scary, well, frankly, inflation, and especially when you compound it over 20 years, you see quite a lot of growth. I think 3.6% is the assumed rate of growth for the budget. So we don't have all the context for it, but for what's presented, I think it's very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Dave, before we move on from that, anything else you want to mention?
No, I just don't know if, if we can look at the 0.25% versus the 0.5%.
Yeah.
And the combo things.
Okay. All right, and maybe we take that offline. Okay, we can do that and come back to the whole group, unless somebody wants to sit around and crunch numbers. All right, thank you for that. And then this final big chart, we've had that. Did you have that up? No, we did not yet. They're all blurring together. This was just so that everyone saw this. We had put together, so you could see, we're just doing a visual acuity test here. For you, Jody. Metaphil, Medigap N, Medigap L. Right. Okay.
I believe Lieutenant Governor wanted to walk us through this.
Yeah, he did earlier, but I want to make sure folks, if they have any other questions. All right, I'll be covering everything. Go ahead.
So Brian, and I'm trying to see this small print here. So can you give me the dollar amount that's set and known what the Part A deductible and the Part B deductible are?
Oh. Can you hear?
Brian, did you hear that question?
Okay, so I was trying to get off mute and back on the video. So say that again.
All right, can you tell me the dollar amount of the Part A deductible that's referenced in the chart and the Part B deductible that's referenced in the chart?
Yeah, the Part B deductible is, like I said, I think it's 278 in 226 in 2023. And, those amounts increase. And the Part A deductible is $1,600.
Okay, so can you give us the Cliff Notes version of N versus L, as far as is there some upfront deductible for some with lower co-payments? The other one has no upfront deductible up and then higher co-payments. Can you just give a really brief code, just the facts, ma'am, kind of summary of one versus the other without going through 18 different rows?
Yeah, so just like G, N does not cover the Part B deductible, right?
Right.
I don't know if it makes sense to maybe scroll over to the left a little bit because the first column's cut off, or maybe shrink the size of it a little bit because it helps to see the particular rows.
So neither N nor L cover that.
So neither N nor L cover that Part B deductible. That's right.
Yeah, okay,
Similar to G, since we're making these little bit of analogies to plans F and G as well, right? So N and L do not cover that Part B deductible. So whenever a participant has a non-hospital service, they're required to pay that first $226 in expenses.
but the much bigger piece is that Part A deductible, and one covers zero. One covers all of it, and one covers 75% of it, right? So that's like the $40 difference between the two, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then co-payment difference?
So co-payment difference between the two are essentially that under N is picking up the majority of the Part B services after the deductible. So it's filling that gap on Part B services, whereas L is covering them not at 100%, but at 75%. So pick a row. And again, I can't see whoever's controlling the screen, if they can scroll to the left a little bit or shrink the size.
We don't want to shrink the size, please.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, so if you go to, tell you what, I'll pull it up on my
You guys
screen.
are awake in class. I'm very proud. Tedious stuff. All right.
So pick a row. Again, I can't see. Hey, so give me a second. I'll do it on my end.
I know it's hard to see, isn't it?
Well, I can't see the whole thing. I can't see the whole.
Uh-oh.
Is that
on-
better?
How about if they do the primary care and specialist office visits?
Yeah, so a primary care or a specialist.
Can you see it?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so under N, the individual is responsible for the Part B deductible, right? Because neither N nor L cover that deductible. So under both cases, N and L, they're both responsible for that first $226. And then once they've met that deductible, N is picking up the 20% that Medicare does not cover, right? Because Medicare is actually paying 80% of that amount over the Part B deductible. So N is covering the full 100% of that 20%, whereas L is only covering 75% of it. There are certain visits that basically require a copay up to $20 as opposed to that 20%. So there are some modest copays under N, whereas L is just covering the participants paying that other 25%. But the primary difference, honestly, between N and L is the fact that N is covering most services not covered by Medicare at 100%, whereas L is only covering them at 75%.
And at worst, most of the time, and I know that just contradicted each other, N may have a $20 co-payment, where L, you've got a 25% co-payment often.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and again, L also has a $400 upfront deductible, where the other one has zero.
That's a $400
Part A
deductible for an inpatient hospital
for
admission.
inpatient, okay.
Yeah, and the only other difference between the two is the foreign travel emergency,
Gotcha.
which is covered under N and is not covered at all under L.
That's great. Brian, thank you very much.
Sure.
And then the difference is too with palliative care a little bit there and blood products, right? Right, Brian? Trying to look at that.
Say that again, Madam Secretary.
Palliative care and hospice is a little bit different, right? I need my magnifying glass. I think.
Once you get cataract surgery, it's all good.
I am not at that age, but thank you,
I know.
Representative.
You're a long way
I
away.
appreciate you very much. It's, oh my goodness. All right. Now I'll get cataracts next year, thank you. So now that you said that to me. Okay, any other questions on the handouts that we've had in here too so far? We're not gonna go into the document, but you all had copies. Because again, we so very much appreciate the time and the effort and the energy of Mr. Bob Clarkin. And those were posted for transparency purposes always on our website. And so our members, we try to share as much as we possibly can, right? And you have something to add.
Yes, and Lieutenant Governor, if I may just clarify as well, those comments are not exclusively from Mr. Clarkin. There are also comments from several others in the
Okay.
packet. that
Oh, I
was provided to
apologize.
us.
There are four. Why don't you tell us who they are?
So if I can remember correctly, we have Bob Clarkin,
Bob just happened to be on top. All right,
the Joe Zaleski,
Joe,
Dr. Joe Luca, and then
Dr.
Linda,
Joe Luca,
and then Linda Hastings.
and Linda Hastings. So if y'all, some are here, some in the other room, some online. We do appreciate, we do review, we do take those. And I believe we have been able to answer the email questions that we have received as well from individuals who have emailed us. I'm gonna stop here and see if there's any comments or feedback from my co-chairs or any other commission members, any items that we've missed. A couple members of the public hands went up, but they've gone back down. So I don't know if that was a slippage with device. But we will certainly have some public comment a little later. So right now we have them before us for consideration. We got the L, we got the N. We've got the 1%, we got things at 0.36. Hopefully today and then at the next meeting, we can really start to, make some decisions. I think we're gonna, like to Jeff's point, before we jump off and just say L and N to his, look at G and get that modeled a little bit. And what do you want?
Lieutenant Governor, if I can just get clarification and make sure that we are aligned in the requests that I'm carrying for further discussion with staff in preparation for the next meeting would be to model Plan N with a buy-up to G.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other requests that I'm hearing would be Mr. Craig's request to model. Is it the same combo that we just modeled with the 0.5% OEC growth at
Yes.
0.25, or are you looking for a different combo?
So combo 3 with 0.25.
Thank you.
With point. Yeah, it's the same model, it's the same model, we'll have it. And the thing is our secretary, Eisenberg, keeps reminding, and I know from the cabinet side, and I'm sure from members of the General Assembly. We obviously, want to be able to give them a choice and just have these models prepared too. For them to be able to be better informed and what the implications might be. Because for some of us, when we went through the changes in the pension, some of us who were there and voted on that. I know Representative Oakley stepped out and Senator Sorensen is in the room, and Representative Wagner and others who were in the room here with us today. Historically, I know that there had been a lot of time and thought put into that modeling from members of the General Assembly.
Can I request that to the extent that the OEC is run again with different, levels, increments, and if a table similar to this is prepared, and there also be what the projected state budget is and what percent of the state contribution divided by the state budget. I think that would provide greater context. If a table like this is to be presented again, can those two columns be added?
Well, it's gonna be presented because we just got a nod and here they've asked for it.
I didn't know what
That's
format,
equal.
whether it was gonna
Can
be
you even-
in this format.
You would just
or
have to
this
share your assumption. You would have to share your
Yeah, I'll talk to
assumptions.
my, so what, it was two columns, so the projected budget.
Budget in dollars, and then with the state contribution divided by the budget. So what's the first, the state
Oh,
contribution?
the percent of pay is already there, we already have all that, I
know,
just
we
pulled
have
out.
I figured it was easy stuff.
Easy. Yeah, you
So-
said it. Whoops,
So I,
the voice of God Geisenberger, professor.
sorry about that.
I'm like, whoa,
So
made me
ear-
jump. Okay, go ahead.
Earlier in the meeting, when we were talking about L versus N, and, I'm certainly open to, seeing what N versus G looks like, which I think is something Jeff asked. But I would like to see us look at the pre-Medicare premiums. And for future retirees, not for people who are already retired. And see what happens if you know, I think as most people know, pre-Medicare retirees are eligible for the same 4 health plans that active employees can choose. And what I'd like to see is a model that looks at what would happen if their state share for pre-Medicare were to double. I believe for the PPO, state employees are paying 13.25% of the premium. I think it's 6% or maybe 6.5% for the HMO. And then there are 2 other plans, one with a 4% premium, one with 5% share that is paid by a state employee. So I'd like to see what the impact is. I mean, ultimately, I'm interested in what it would be combined with other options, but I'd like to see what impact that has. If you say that pre-Medicare retirees have the same 4 options that they currently have, but they would pay a higher premium than an active employee.
You got that higher.
So in addition, I know there had been some modeling around what happens if you go to 20, 25 years, 30 years as the eligibility for the 50%, 75%, 100%. I think that's been modeled in the past and shown, but I'm interested in what would be the impact of going to 20, 22.5, and 25. And the reason I'm asking for both of those is because I think if you did that combination atop of some of these buy-up options, it probably, my theory is that it gets you to the at least the 80% goal that was discussed in this committee. As you know, as I previously stated, I think that is too low of a goal, but and not the best practice. But I believe that looking at those sort of changes might be the combination that gets you to something that works.
Okay, so Joanna, everything clear as mud?
Absolutely.
You know what you gotta do? Awesome, glad that you have that. Well, we have a lot that we've covered. And again, I think we're getting there. Medicare, whether it's LN, with a buy-up to G, options of the 1%, consideration possibly other pre-funding, changes perhaps around the eligibility. I know, Wayne, you had a motion that you had wanted. I think now might be a good time unless there's other comments from others online here. Okay, Representative Overly.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Rick's comments. I didn't hear much about eligibility. What I did hear about is raising premiums for pre-Medicare retirees.
For modeling, I mean, we're not voting per se for us to have to vote on it.
I'm requesting that it be modeled and looked at for future retirees, not people who are currently retired.
No, I understand that. I understand.
Okay.
I want to make sure I clearly understood what you're asking.
That help? Did you have any thoughts for us at this point on pre-retiree or anything? Or
No,
not
the only,
much?
I guess, general thought I have is how many models we're going to produce before we start to.
Oh, we're gonna have to vote next time, because
Yeah.
you and I want to do that in September, so we need to, I concur with you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it got to Representative Bombach's point, you know, that, you know, going to these designs. And then tweaking whether or not, how much we tweak with eligibility, and again, a lot of this falls to the SEBC and certainly. You know, Secretary Demadius and DHR and some of their work in the future, but. We want to give the governor's office and members of the General Assembly, hopefully some well thought out material and options to consider. Yes, go ahead.
And say adding to retired Representative Everly's comments, and for that matter, Secretary Eisenberger. I had hoped that we would have, you know, been done this originally, you know, at the beginning of May when the original plan was, and then now we were like, you know, beginning of September. I'm convinced that we aren't going to be anywhere close to that. And partly it's
Oh,
frankly
sorry about that.
the point that Secretary Geisenberger pointed
Representing
out.
Mike Barbie area, imagine that.
With-
I'm so
with-
sorry, my phone has got a mind of its own, it's on mute. But it did get dropped on the way in here and I think I broke my phone, but didn't know it till now. Sorry.
So one of the things we saw in this subcommittee in the early meetings was the current gap of funding is roughly 55% of those who are of Medicare age and 45% of those before. And frankly, we've had this headlong rush into doing something on the Medigap part, the 65 plus part of the population, and neglecting, or at least not getting to yet, the sub 65-year-olds. And I think that's really necessary. I think it's important for us not to say we need to get to 100%, only addressing 55% of the population. So I think we need to get to it. I think it's not worth even dreaming that we're going to get it done this month. So, you know, I'm very comfortable pushing that stuff off and saying, just same as the RBSC and the SEBC last time, as they said, look, we've got an RFP coming up. Let's laser focus on that. We know we're only dealing with a subset of the population, retiree population, both current and future. Let's get that part done. And I hate to say it, and we're going to keep meeting and get to those other pieces.
I appreciate that. And believe me, I serve on the SEBC subcommittee. I monitor all the SEBC meetings. I understand the problem with costs of the pre-65 retiree population, but I guess, and I think you answered my question. I mean, we could get all tied up in the minutia and forget the original charge, and that was my concern.
Right, and we don't want to lose it. We are gonna have those, definitely have to have those votes and motions. And again, the General Assembly and leadership, you know, who contacted some secretaries and contacted me this past week, you know, they want our recommendations too. So I'm not sure how level of detail or what, but we do need to provide that and to move forward. And Kristen will be back from her time off then too.
And Kristen has joined us as well on her vacation today.
Oh,
actually.
Kristen on
So
vacation.
She is helping me in the scenes today.
Thank you, Kristen. All right, appreciate that. So, oh, go ahead. Say hello.
You're welcome.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. All right, Wayne, you had a motion too that you wanted to, you had several, but we had talked about maybe just getting a name.
You, man.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Governor, and thanks.
Thank you.
And just for everyone's, I brought 4 motions with me and didn't know which ones would be appropriate at the
We
time.
may not get through all those.
No, and that's fine, and perhaps none of them, or not all of them, but, and that's certainly fine. I just said, I didn't know how the meeting was gonna go, and I figured I'd be.
Well, no, now, I mean, and some people have been sitting here listening to us for weeks, say it, so let's vote on it.
So, yes, so
Right.
the motion that I'm prepared to make is motion number 2 on the page, which says, I move that this subcommittee recommend that 1, current Medicare eligible and pre-Medicare state retirees, and 2, state employees who retire prior to 1/1/2025 be entitled to special Medicaid/RX benefits or a substantially equivalent Medicare supplement with prescription plan, with no changes in the state share percentage of payments. Essentially, that's the grandfathering that we've been talking about for weeks.
Yeah.
And that puts it into sort of
Months.
legalistic language.
So that is in layman's terms, put it in people's speak, grandfathering, what,
Yeah.
can you put it in people's speak?
In essence, what this is saying is folks that are retired or that retire before 1/1/2025 will be under the plan that those Medicare folks are in right now.
So the word grandfathering,
So they're grandfathered,
okay,
yes.
all right, people speak, all right, so we have a motion, do I have a second?
I'd like to second that.
All right, we've got several seconds.
Let the senator take it. Let the senator
I-
take it.
All right, so we're gonna do a roll call on
Can we
this.
discuss?
Yes. Oh,
Excuse me,
please.
excuse me. Can I ask that he read that exactly word for word?
Yes, you can, go ahead, sir.
And I
And
may ask
Secretary-
you to read it more than once, because I want to make sure I understand
Do
every
you
word of it.
want me to screenshot this picture to you, since you don't have it in front of you? I will send this to you too, how about that?
Yeah, while you're doing that.
The
I'll be-
technologies of this world.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Senator Pajon also, I'm not sure what he's gonna say, but Senator Pajon, I think, had a comment or a question.
Yeah, we're gonna discuss it while we send it. We have plenty of time for discussion, so Senator Payne, Subcommittee, Senator Petty John, I'm glad that you're here. We delayed sir till you could be back. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I appreciate it. Was there at a bill signing over in Tatnall, but
I know you were
just
held
wanted
up
to make
at a
sure
bill
that,
signing, so.
yeah, just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that I was here for the roll call.
You got it. I waited to see your name, sir. I follow your.
If you would be so kind as to read it one more
Sure.
time, I am going to email it to all subcommittee members as you are reading it.
Okay.
Excuse me, I move the subcommittee recommend that one, current Medicare eligible and pre-Medicare state retirees, and two, state employees who retire prior to 1/1/2025 shall be entitled to special Medicaid/RX benefits or a substantially equivalent Medicare supplement with prescription plan with no changes in the state's share percentage of payments.
Okay,
May I ask a question?
yes, Secretary Geisenberger.
Does that motion preclude offering any alternative to those retirees?
That would be a second motion that could be made.
Well, they still have the option to avail
Right.
themselves of Medicare Advantage if they want,
Right,
right?
Highly
would.
purchased.
They can leave
Right.
the Medigap plan, the state
Right.
offers and partake of a Medicare Advantage
Or,
plan if they so
or if we come up with another option, we can certainly, I can't speak for RFP. But you could perhaps, if we come up with something with Medicare LRN, they would probably be able to, it would be dependent on how you contract that, right? Or my
Well, I'm
law.
not advocating for a
Yeah.
Medicare Advantage
Yeah.
plan. What I'm suggesting is people today can leave.
Yeah, they can buy it now.
And go get a Medicare Advantage
Right.
plan if they so choose.
Right, right. But this is a
So-
straight up grandfathering, saying that we are grandfathering the current retirees.
So let me, if I can ask another question, what does he understand the word entitled to mean as opposed to the word shall be offered?
We can say.
I do have some concerns about the word entitled. I don't have any issue with grandfathering. I've said several times that I support it. But, to me, people are offered this choice. I don't know that there's an entitlement
But under the same term.
in the way that there is to someone, say, pension.
Well, keep in mind, we are providing recommendations to the members of the General Assembly who ultimately vote for this and recommendations to a governor. So again, I think words do matter, but
Well,
again,
I guess I would ask, would the person who made the motion be comfortable with using the word shall be offered as opposed to the word shall be entitled?
oh, the members of. Wayne is not moving on that.
Confer
Well,
with
can
myself.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Brian,
No, I
Senator
think
Townsend.
Defer to Brian.
Senator Townsend.
Did I jump Jeff yet again just now?
Yes, you did, but he let you do that. Go ahead.
Oh, well, maybe we're all better off if Jeff goes first, actually.
Go ahead, Joe.
What was that?
What were you gonna say, Joe?
No, I deferred to Brian on the second, so it's floor says.
All right, hot potatoes to you. Go ahead,
Fair-
Brian. Senator
Fair
Townsend.
enough. No, I appreciate that Secretary Geisenberger addressed Wayne in terms of having brought the motion, what Wayne's understanding is. I feel like the word, particularly noting that this is an advisory body issuing recommendations. I think using the word entitled, I believe to mean to indicate the strength of recommendation that we are talking about and that perhaps until this moment, everybody had agreed on with regard to the idea that the category of people that Wayne has talked about, perhaps still, extending it to those who have not yet retired and will not until that date in 2025, shall be grandfathered. And so the idea of grandfathering someone, I take to mean to be essentially an entitlement.
Yeah.
And I certainly understand that the word entitlement has, certain implications or binding legal obligations as a matter of sort of government policy, other kinds of policy. But I thought that I certainly feel personally that that is exactly what we were talking about with regard to this group of individuals. That we are saying that they shall be entitled to a certain set of healthcare benefits and supports. Now, I second the motion with both the understanding and also the belief that it shouldn't preclude them being offered other options. I'm not quite sure where we all are with regard to acknowledging or agreeing that there is perhaps a difference between a Medicare Advantage plan that the state might be able to bargain for and structure compared to plans available in the private market. But to Secretary Geisenberger's point, I don't think that saying that a group of people is entitled to something somehow precludes them from being offered a separate choice. It just in some ways just strengthens the fact that anything else is simply a choice, and that if they choose not to avail themselves of that, that they are then the default becomes the options that they are entitled to. So I guess I'm not trying to thread some needle here. I feel that it's right there that entitlement means a certain strong pledge, and that if another choice is offered, fine, okay, but that people can feel that they know they're going to have the Medicaid supplement type of plan as a guarantee. So that's kind of where I come down. Both supporting where Wayne's coming from and saying that I understand where Secretary Geisenberger is coming from. I don't think it's like a choice between those two positions.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, to Representative Bomba.
I believe the motion includes discussion of pre-Medicare age retirees, and I don't believe you can offer a Medicare supplement to somebody who's not eligible for Medicare.
What I mean by that is if they're retired right now and are at pre-Medicare age, when they
get there.
Yes.
Okay.
They're retired right prior to the.
Maybe there's a clause we can have that just clarifies it, makes that clear. And has your full intent. So actually, if I can look at it, I can
Here.
try to wordsmith it. How's that? You're good. You keep it.
I've got enough.
Oh, you got more? Okay.
All right, you get that. Like we're at the time clock for the game show. Give you a little music. All right. While he's doing that, any other questions from committee members?
Yeah, so
Yes,
again, my comment would be that were this language to make its way into legislative language, I think there is a big difference between offered and entitled. And I think that without some, frankly, I'd like to talk to a lawyer about what that would mean, both from an actuarial perspective as well as a legal perspective, to use that word. So, I would vote in favor of grandfathering if this language was offered. I'm not prepared to vote today on the word entitled because I think it has legal ramifications that go well beyond the scope of this committee. So.
All right, well, thank you for your feedback, and I know joining in on that. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else's comments?
I think simply adding at the end, comma, when they are Medicare eligible.
When they are Medicare eligible.
Yeah, when eligible.
Yeah. Mr. Representative Overton. Mr.
You
Vin.
should call me anything. I call a question.
Right, and I appreciate that, and to Mr. Secretary, we certainly recognize the seat for which you are in. And certainly also understand with Senator Townsend where he is coming from as well. So if there are no other points of discussion, we have a motion properly seconded before us. Discussion has now occurred. Anyone else? Then let us then call the question, which is Mr. If I can read your handwriting here. We are going to be, I move the subcommittee, I'm going to repeat it, recommend that current Medicare eligible and pre-Medicare state retirees and state employees who retire prior to 1/1/2025 shall be entitled to special Medicare RX benefits or a substantially equivalent medical supplemental prescription plan with no changes to the state share percentage of payments when they are Medicare eligible. So then we will start with our roll call.
So I will start off with Director Gabe.
Not voting.
Secretary DeMatteis.
Not voting.
Commissioner Navarro,
Yes.
Secretary Geisenberger,
Not voting.
Representative Ramon,
Yes.
Senator Pettyjohn,
Yes.
David Craig,
Yes.
Jeff Tashner,
Yes.
Bill Overly,
Yes.
Denise Allen,
Yes.
and then Representative Bomback.
Yes,
And Senator Townsend.
Yes.
And then as Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
Okay.
and Mr. Emsley.
Wayne gets to vote.
Don't have a gavel, but that's good. Thank you. All right. And again, this is a recommendation that will be part of the report, and it will be solely noted that, you know, certainly there were some members who were not able to vote at this time. So we will continue conversation. So I know we have modeling before us to consider at our next meeting. We can certainly turn to you know, public comment at this time. I think it would be a good opportunity if anyone has anything left to offer or to say at this time, and I don't know.
But we're also coming back to the subcommittee after public.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can. I'm just doing this out of kindness. I'm looking around the room at retirees, and some look like they're tired. I'm just thinking, I'm just being courteous. I didn't mean that in a negative way. It's the nurse. I am just meaning it in a nice way. I think I heard my former boss, Dr. Campini, holler down the hallway at me. But we would like to allow that opportunity. And I do know Wayne had several motions. I'm not sure he'll get to all of them, but perhaps there's another one he'd like to today. I'm not trying to be rude to you, Wayne. I'm just
No, I think-
feeling the room.
I was going to suggest that we do public comment and then we'll have the other motions.
Okay, yes.
Prior to public comment, Madam Chair, I guess just a reminder to the retiree community, we resolved one segment of the problem, but I hope you all stay involved because it's a lot yet to be determined on how
Right.
future retirees are going to be treated. So
Yeah.
I would ask you to stay involved, stay engaged. It's been very helpful.
Right.
I've enjoyed the hundreds of emails I've got. And the active employees, because there's a lot more at stake here just beyond. what
There's a
we
lot.
resolved.
And then again, we
So-
definitely, the lights are out. And again, it's very, very cognizant of the time and the energy that our, you know, cabinet secretary's team, DHR, pension office staff, you know, put in, you know, and it's not easy always, and we're not done. This is just one recommendation that we voted on, one of the more obvious, and then what we'll be able to do is certainly, hopefully at our next meeting, really come in and really hone in on some of those models and take a few more votes for the future for the final report. All right, with that, if there are others, anyone who would like to comment, I would ask if some of you had come. We have a lot. How many people do we have to speak? Many. She's writing them down. I just wanted to add. Oh, add in your name. How many do we have?
So we only had 2 pre-registered,
Okay.
and then I do have 6 now.
Okay. And others. Right. And for those who are joining us, I know kindly on your vacation time, we have probably around 20 minutes of comments. Is that how many do we have? Like 6 people?
7 right now.
7, so we probably have around 20 to 30 minutes of comments.
Do those in the satellite room have the ability to speak from there?
We did let them know that if you wanted to make public comment, they stop down here.
We can't even turn the lights off. She came, she
Turn the lights out.
Did you fill this out?
I did. Are you number one on
Is there
the?
anyone else in here that needs this?
If you're, and you're okay, Sam? Yes, sure, okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right, so do you want to take us in the order? And I would like to request if there are members who are physically present to have physical challenge or need to please let us know. We will bump you to the top of our list.
So I will start with the two that pre-registered. So we do have Patrick Gaffney, so I'm going to give him permission to talk. Patrick, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, some of this is probably going to be redundant. This is the first time I attended one of your meetings, so I was very impressed by how diligently you're working on this problem, so thank you. So as I said, my name is Patrick Gaffney. I retired in 2019 after 33 years as a professor at the University of Delaware. I was hired in 1987. A significant part of the compensation package was retirement benefits, as the salary at the time was pretty modest by comparison with the private sector. So I was very surprised more recently to hear that the state was planning to move existing retirees from the Medic-Fill plan to Medicare Advantage. And let me just give you two examples of why that upset me so much, and why it would have been such a disadvantage for my family. Several years ago, my wife was diagnosed with a rare and serious form of uterine cancer, which required special treatment not available in Delaware. She was successfully treated at a highly regarded gynecological oncology center in Baltimore and is now 6 years cancer-free. This would not have happened had we been on Medicare Advantage. More recently, we spend several months a year out of state in Seattle helping out with grandchildren. And last summer when we were there, my wife had to go to the ER after a fall during a family backpacking trip. This unplanned out-of-network ER visit would have not been possible with Medicare Advantage, and we would have had a substantial medical bill to pay out of pocket. So from our perspective, this plan to cancel our Medic-Fill and replace it with an inferior Medicare Advantage plan was very disturbing. So I'm very happy to hear that progress has been made on this front. And I just would say, speaking for my fellow UD retirees, a lot of us do spend a fair amount of time out of state, and the Medicare Advantage makes that quite difficult. So thank you for your discussions today and on the issue of grandfathering. And thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
So the next one we have is Diana Noonan. I do have you unmuted.
I just need a second. I'm actually at Nemours Hospital with my grandson, and I have to run in a room here. Okay. My husband's medical bills for his cancer treatment are at about $150,000 for the past 5 weeks of treatment. We have not been billed anything as of this time because Medicare and Medicare are picking up the total cost. I'm guessing that should we have had Medicare Advantage, our co-insurance and copays could be up to $30,000. Also, the procedures he is undergoing involve a drug that might not have been covered by Medicare Advantage because it requires a special authorization even under Medicare. At this time, that drug is standard of care for his cancer. By now, the state's retirees have beaten Medicare Advantage to death. We have proven that it's a dishonest plan. It's deceptive, filled with loopholes that bilk retirees out of their hard-earned Medicare benefits. I am not sure if it is still in consideration, although I am now after listening to your conversations, but it should not be for so many reasons. Also, it's my firm opinion that the OPEC liability is the responsibility of the state of Delaware, not retirees. To attempt to appease us by throwing 1% of the yearly budget at it when the state neglected their obligation and frankly acted like they just didn't care is a disgrace. They should be at least 2 to 3% of the budget, and that would show us good faith. The state waited until it became a problem for them to address this, and attempting to put it the onus on the backs of the elderly former employees instead of standing up and saying, we screwed up and we take responsibility. I want to believe that this body, the members of this committee, intend to do the right thing by us and hold the state accountable. The majority of the burden should be borne by the state. It seems like I'm frustrated. I am. I'm struggling. I'm sad, and many of us are. We should not have to go through this kind of stress at this point in our lives. I love being a grandmother. It's the greatest gift and pleasure of my life. My grandchildren and I are extremely close, and we talk about everything. I tell them, be kind, stick up for people you love, stick up for what you believe in, be honest, and always tell the truth. And know that when you make a promise to someone, you have to follow through, no matter how difficult it might be. They can count on me to always keep my promises. And believe me, they hold me accountable. It is time to hold the state accountable and to do the right thing. Grandfather the grandparents, grandfather the retirees at the same level of coverage that we enjoy today and that we've worked for, we've earned, and we've been promised. Thank you.
Thank you, and my thoughts are with you, Diana, for sure.
The next one we have is here in person is Linda Hastings.
Here she is. She's here.
Which one?
That's Linda, right. Oh, the other Linda. I'm so confused. All right, go ahead.
Right. Well, for those of you on the committee, I sent a message last night and my poem is on the back of your package. But for those who aren't here, so I wrote this about Medicare Advantage because it just won't go away. With the vote you've just taken, it may have gone away for us, but it's still hanging out there for people who haven't retired yet, so I'm gonna read you the poem. It was 1 year ago when the state let us know you intended to change Medicare. Silver sneakers, one card, only hit just how hard our life would be. It just wasn't fair. Most surely by now, most of you will know how bad it is to deny and delay our care. But still too often are heard these discouraging words, Medicare Advantage, it just won't go away. How much more will it take for this group to make the decision to table MA? We've been tortured enough. You've looked at this stuff, close the book on it this very day. And you should do it for the rest of the people too, not just us. With regard to this committee, this is 11 o'clock last night. I'm writing this stuff for you.
And we get to read it like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yes, well, if you, in your head, if you can play what I was hearing in my head while I was writing it, it's, it'll give me a home with a buffalo room. I've heard the tease that your grandfather made that my healthcare will be just the same. But between same and exact, there can be quite a crack. So write it down so it cannot be gamed. Medicare supplement, Medic-Fill or Part F or G are the level of care we expect. Again, write it down because when you're not around, your clear words will be all that's left to protect us. I note you've no meeting after August on the public record. How can this be? I'm worried. It doesn't bode well. You've been better than I thought you'd be. Saturday. And so without you, I now fear there will be less light and things may not go well. There's many a slip twixt the cup and the lip, so creating your report's not the end. You must watch, as will we, how the new RFP is accurate as it is penned.
All right. Thank you. Next is Tom Pledgey.
The trouble with sitting through these meetings is your legs go.
Yeah.
I just sent you all, by the way, an email. And that email is very simple. Okay, I want to make sure we're all on the same damn page. Okay.
Remember, we have to edit, please no
It
cursing.
doesn't matter. That's not, the president said the same thing I said at the last meeting, and
I
it was
know.
reported on CBS News.
Yeah, we
Now,
can't, but it
let's-
just makes it harder for our staff.
I know,
They
but it
have to
only
edit
takes
it.
20 seconds to edit it. What we're talking about Medicville is this, plus this. Do we agree? That's Medicville. It's the contract that Faith and her gang have with this thing called Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware, known as Highmark. It does not, and this is for your next RFP, Brian. That's the heart of your next RFP. It doesn't include this BS. Okay, which is 40 pages, 2,000 prior approval items. That's what's not in your next RFP, Brian. Now we have a question, and I sent a couple of them to the insurance commissioner, and I thank you, sir. And the questions I wanted to raise were, if you go to the Medicare Gov site, every one of us can go to that today, and you put in there, you live in Delaware, and you put in there your age, your gender, and whether or not you smoke. It will pop up with providers for Medigap plans. G is the one that came up for me. Okay, now it doesn't come up with one or two, because remember last time when Faith and our gang went out, they only had 2 bids on this disaster called the Medicare Advantage plan. We could get priced for 38 vendors for a G plan. And you know who one of those vendors is? Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware, okay? How much does the state say they're paying for our coverage? $3,300, right? That's the number they keep throwing around. Well, I went in, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Delaware on that federal site, and I asked the insurance commissioner to verify this. I can buy that for $1,600 a year as a private citizen, okay? As an 80-year-old, which Paul had that sheet, remember? It showed a beautiful graph, and it said, hey, we can't do HRA because at 80, it's going to get too expensive. Well, Highmark will sell me that plan for $2,300, not $3,200. And when you get older, at 90, they'll sell it to me for $3,200. I think Jeff was the man who asked at the very first meeting, is there a better way to do Medicville than we're doing it? And I'm saying to you folks, we do have a better way. It may be a better gap.
You had time.
Very good, I appreciate that. Medigap G, okay? I'm not saying it's the only option, you can go with F, but it's an option, and sure heck, it isn't more expensive than we're spending now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on. We do have Karen Peterson.
Very thorough.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. First, I want to say thank you from the retirees in this room and the 20 or 30 who are packed in that little conference room down the hall, who are hanging in there, as hot as it is down there. I just want to thank you because you listened to us and you cared about what happened to us. And that was the most important thing that to all of us. So thank you for your vote. I want to refer back to comments I made at the last meeting about the charts, the slides, that in the right-hand column show the affected cohorts or impacted cohorts, whatever it says. And I suggested the last time that retirees be added to that list, just as taxpayers. Well, they're not the only ones that are impacted. The retirees, when you talk about changing the premiums and lowering the state share and all that, the state retirees are an impacted cohort. So could you please, WTW, add the retirees to that column to show that it's not just the taxpayers. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I thank Mr. Tasher for bringing this up, is the whole thing about Medigap plans L and N's. They seem to just fall out of the sky at the last meeting. Never had there been any discussion about plans L and N. We talked about F and G a lot, but somehow these just appeared out of nowhere. Plan L is a terrible plan without a pocket cost beginning at $3,470 a year and very high co-payments. I can tell you, there's nobody wants Plan L. It's almost as bad as Medicare Advantage, but at least you know how much you're going to get stuck with. Under Plan L, under Medicare Advantage, you have no clue what you're going to get stuck with. The state recently passed a bill to allow new hires to start getting benefits from day one instead of waiting 3 months. And that's because they're having such a problem with recruitment and retention, and there are so many vacancies. Well, I had a chance over the weekend to read the retirement eligibility report that DHR just issued, and it says that 92% of the employees in the executive branch agencies, 92%, are eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. 92%. 26% of them could retire today, could walk out today. So my point in saying this is because if this committee recommends reducing benefits or drastically increasing premiums, or I should wait to see the mass exodus. You know, there was a school teacher at the last meeting who said, I'm 27 years in, I don't want to retire. But if you pull my benefits out from under me, I and a whole lot of other people are going to be out the door. So, you know, these two problems are connected, the vacancies and the number of people who are eligible to walk out very soon. So I just asked you to consider that in making your further decisions. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mary Graham. My name is Mary Graham, and I'm speaking as a retiree. And it occurred to me as I was looking through materials, thinking about yet another meeting, that Saturday marks 1 year since Representative Kowalko published his opinion in the News Journal. I had no clue about Medicare Advantage before then. Happily just think, oh, everything's the same. And fortunately, somebody saw that, alerted my husband, and then all is history, as they say. So, but that's been 1 year of fight. And Representative Overly, you can count on it. We're not leaving. We're not done with the fight, because Medicare Advantage is not gone away. And we know that the folks who are pushing it will continue to push it and push it and push it. My position is that Medicare Advantage is terrible. I don't support it in any way, shape, or form now or ever for anybody. And what I would ask you all to think about is, you've done an amazing amount of work. You have dug in. I've read the minutes for all kinds of committees for years. This is the first committee that has really been able to, many of you tried before, but you've been able to dig in, press, get more information. And I would say, listen to all of us. I mean, it's pretty amazing actually to come to a government meeting and hear that, you know, you acknowledge some questions from the public and actually answer them, and you're listening. That's fantastic. So what I would ask, no one else is going to send a strong message, but you all can. So I ask you, please send a strong message, which will come out of, it comes out of all this work that you've done in consideration and analysis, that Medicare Advantage should be excluded from your recommendations. Yes, all you do is make recommendations, but those recommendations are really important. So I ask you to please, please, please exclude Medicare Advantage. Now, someone has asked me, well, what if it gets better in the future? Well, you know, the sun might rise on the west too. I mean, Medicare Advantage has a specific defined form, and you know, if it's run by insurance companies, it's going to continue to be run by insurance companies. Well, let's keep things simple. Just recommend that it be taken off the table from your recommendations. And I would like to acknowledge again, as Ms. Peterson did, that we have at least 30 people in the other room, and all of you who have shown up to support getting rid of Medicare Advantage. And I hope the committee really appreciates this. Since I have 20 seconds left, I want to respond to one thing that Secretary Geisenberger said, who he expressed concern about the legislature and what they might do as far as funding into the future. Well, remember, they fixed the pension fund, as Bob Clarkin has talked about, and I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I just don't buy that they won't fix it with a reasonable request. Thank you. I'm sure really hard not to butcher this next one.
Say the first name then.
That's the problem.
Oh, say the last name.
Fenimore. That's me.
We see you in person. We get to hear you often.
First name is Georgiana.
Yes.
I am retired. I spoke last time. I'm a retired fourth grade teacher. Loved it. I can't imagine any kind of profession. I love it. But I want to talk, first of all, before I go, I want to thank you guys for really grandfathering all the retirees for making that recommendation. I also hope that you vote and make a recommendation not to do Medicare high market advantage. We researched, we've read, it is not a good plan for the people of Delaware. But I'm also here to talk about people that are working now and what they are going to have when they retire. And I hope that they would have a Medifil or also a plan like that, not increase that deductibles, not increase co-pays. They signed on to do a job in the state, knowing what the benefits were going to be when they retired. And I hope that you would look at keeping those benefits the same. That's why I think option C is horrible. I think it should be for new hires only. For Secretary Geisenberg, is that right? Geisenberger. I hear him talking about getting to 80%, but I don't hear any information or what's going to happen to employees trying to get to that 80%, how they're going to be affected, how much more it's going to cost them. State employees don't make a lot of money. We're not in the private sector, and increasing just a little bit sometimes is the difference between a meal. Okay, we're going to see a grandchild, so please keep that in mind. And I would like to have him research how that getting to 80%, which is the magic number, is going to affect when people, state employees. And that's about all I have to say, and just thank you for doing the job you're doing. I don't know how you read all those charts and keep everything straight. So, thank you. Thank you. Next up is Julie O'Connor.
Hello, I would like to thank the committee for the recommendation of grandfathering those who are already in and all of their work. I'm a current employee, so if this meeting were Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, I'm the ghost of Christmas future. As I mentioned, I'm a current employee. I have over 25 years in service to the state, but I will not be able to retire before January 1st, 2025. Or I will not have my 30 years by that point. In looking at eligibility, I hope you would consider that it be based on service. I don't know if people can retire, with considerably lower amounts before January 1st, 2025, but as someone who has stuck it out all this time, I would hope that I would be eligible for the Medicare. Many of my colleagues are not even aware of this. As Mary Graham mentioned, when I've said something to them, they're like, oh, really? What's that all about? We took the survey and that was presented to us this spring, and it was very confusing. And there were a lot of kind of these questions of, would you rather have these 3 items or these 3 items? And it was just, some of them didn't make sense. So whatever the survey said, it was not an easy to understand survey. Just in looking ahead, one of the things, my concerns of Medicare Advantage with the pre-approvals, if I were to become ill, I would want to, Delaware's a small state, I would want to have access to regional medical facilities, places like Penn or Johns Hopkins or Fox Chase or Cooper, or MD Henderson at Cooper. One of my concerns is in Delaware, more and more you're seeing Bay Health, Christiana buying up things. I mean, in theory, you could see Christiana own everything and there would be no competition and prices would go up. That's something I think that should be a concern to the the secretary and, and others. Another concern, I'm not sure, it mentioned earlier, I'm not sure where I will eventually end up, but potentially it could be out of state. And if we have Medicare Advantage, that would not be of any, any help to me. If you ask most current state employees what they would like in retirement as far as a benefit, I would say the majority would say a pension and health insurance like I currently have. I'm currently on the Highmark, I can't think of what it's called. PPL. Yeah, that one. And I'm very thankful for that, and I hope to continue. Continue. Yes, okay.
Next, we have Beverly Baxter.
Yes, I'm going to say echoes what others have said as well, but I have recently had 2 medical issues that have required that I go out of state. So thank you very much for what you have just done, because what I need, I cannot get in Delaware. And the second thing that I'd like to point out is my husband retired as head of vocational rehabilitation services with the state of Delaware. What I'm reading here, first of all, he could have done that kind of work elsewhere. He did it with lower pay because of the benefits. Only because of the benefits, because he could have done it elsewhere. What are Karen's points? What are you going to do in the future for employees to attract them to the state of Delaware if you don't have adequate pension and medical benefits because they have other opportunities? And then the final thing is when I read here about eligibility reduced spousal state share subsidy to 50%, when I look at things like that, that also makes a difference in terms of who might want to work for the state of Delaware if that's what you're going to do, because you need to be able to take care of not only yourself, but your family later. And so thank you for what you've done today, but please look at what is coming up for employees that are not already retired or soon to retire. That's right. Thank you.
Joan Delpator.
Hi, I'm Joan Delpator. I'm a retired University of Delaware professor. There have been several jokes about all the emails that I've gotten, and I have been responsible for some of
I was
them.
gonna say you're prolific.
You have been hearing from us. What I wanted to draw attention to is a common thread that runs through all of those, regardless of what the topic is. Every email you receive is evidence in and of itself of an ordinary tax-paying, law-abiding citizen of the state of Delaware that does not trust the state government. A law-abiding citizen, generally speaking, can't speak for her, but generally, who feels that we need to get directly involved. Look at this, watch out for that. No, this won't work. That's not normally the way the state functions, and it shouldn't be the way the state functions. The biggest example of that was that budget epilogue language. Notwithstanding any other provision of the law, let's do that Medicare Advantage contract that had been signed the previous year. The only reason that's not now in the budget, because I don't think the Joint Finance Committee would have spotted it, it was very subtle, is former State Senator Karen Peterson from Rice, Delaware, spotted it, exposed it. But you know what? We shouldn't have to do that. The citizens of the state should not have to be that vigilant to prevent state officials from trying to do an end run. This subcommittee has done as much as anyone, more than anyone else, to start addressing that, in part because of the way the subcommittee has been run, and in part by what you did last time, when you voted for a goal, so that we're talking about what do we need to do to make the OPEB liability reasonable, to make it work, beyond which we don't need to go. It's bi-directional. Things have to be added to it, but it also says beyond a certain point, we don't need to go. There is all the difference in the world between responsibly, financially responsibly handling an obligation and reneging on that obligation. We've already established Medicare Advantage for anyone, including current employees, Medicare Advantage is reneging because it costs nothing, you can get it off the shelf. And it is essentially not paying the benefit we were promised. I was surprised, by the way, to hear that I'm not entitled to the type of coverage I was promised. I have it in writing. Medicare, it says original Medicare and a supplement. In what way is it still up for grabs whether I'm entitled to that? Does the state of Delaware as an employer think that with anyone who's working for the state, including those who were hired yesterday, if they came to work for the state because they were promised that this is the kind of retirement benefit they would have, since when is the state able to now decide after the fact, maybe we're not going to want to do it? Offering it like offering a biscuit to a puppy, really? I would respectfully suggest, or actually respectfully thank the committee for everything you've done so far. And I hope you will continue to move the state back to the level of decency that we were used to before and that we want to believe is Delaware.
And I have Nancy Wagner.
Representative Wagner.
Thank you. My name is Nancy Wagner. I represented North Dover in the General Assembly for 16 years. Most of my constituents work for the state. So I'm really aware of how they feel and how they cared about their jobs and why they work for the state. One of the things that I don't think I have heard much about is what we have now, and it's piggybacking on what Senator Peterson said. We have issues today with filling state jobs, filling teachers, needing the people, the good people we need for the state jobs. State jobs are not easy. They don't pay a lot of money and you work very hard for not a lot of reward. And we need state workers. Make sure that you are looking at the consequences of the workforce. I understand the money issue. I understand the budget issue. I understand the payment issue to the retiree. But what is the consequences to the state when the workforce group suddenly declines? Because people are going to retire if suddenly they realize, I'm not going to get what I thought I was going to get. Now, I can tell you truthfully, I spent 30 years in the classrooms. There are tons of teachers that have been there 18, 20 years, maybe you're saying, I got to stay because I got to get to 30 to retire. I'm going to say they're good teachers, but they've had enough. They've had it. That if you tell them, you know, you're not going to get it, we're just reneging on all this, they're going to say, see ya. And then the state is going to be stuck with a huge workforce development issue. The monies of that are not inconsequential. You would go stuck with not being able to find the people you need, let alone what it will cost to train them. So that's a piece that I really haven't heard anybody here mention. It's a separate piece than the monies, that I deeply respect what you have done. I've been most impressed with the work you have done. I understand the budget issue. I understand the issue to the actual retiree, but you've got to look at the workforce development issue for this state and realize that's another piece. There are a lot of money spent by the state to develop workforce, good workforce, and that has to figure in with your total thing. Again, thank you so much for what you've done. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your previous service. Senator Peterson, we appreciate that.
Okay, is there anyone else in here that would like to make a public comment?
Tom
Can I get
Pinoza
your
signed up.
name?
Tom Pinoza.
Oh, did we skip you? Sorry about that.
Don't have him on here.
He might have signed on the wrong list, or who knows where that list went.
No, we signed right now.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. No worries. And then we'll go to the online, those who've been patiently waiting online.
Okay, I wanted to talk about, thank you first for your vote today. I'm a retiree, already retired on Medicare. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Medicare Advantage. So to let you know why I feel the way I do. I was a police officer most of my life, and I worked 10 years for the Consumer Protection Unit at the Attorney General's office. And I investigated businesses that defraud the public. And basically what that is they lie to them. They lie to them to get their money or to get whatever it is they want. And we made arrests and we made civil cases out of that. Okay, when this first came out about Medicare Advantage, I started looking into it myself. Couldn't get answers from Highmark to any of my questions. Couldn't get answers from the state pension office. Went to a meeting, couldn't get answers there to the way this thing was going to operate. And eventually I found out that, we were being told this thing was, the Medicare Advantage plan was exactly what we had, the same thing. And it turns out it wasn't even close. 1,600 and some
procedures and that require pre-authorization. When with Medicare, I have none for any kind of stuff I've had some surgeries too. And then you also have 5 levels of appeal, so you could be dead before you ever get through the appeal process. But anyway, you know, I found out we're being forced into a plan that I had never even heard about. We were already in the process of being put into it. If I was working a case when I was in the consumer protection unit against a business that was lying to people and promising them something, you know, telling them they were going to get something they weren't going to get, that's a fraud case, and we would bring an action against them. I know it was the state that was doing, I don't know, I couldn't get accurate information from the state or from Time Warner. But a lady at the pension office did tell me I was lucky I was getting insurance because the state didn't have to give it to me. So what I've learned before this and then during this process is that Medicare Advantage plans are scams promoted by snake oil salesmen, and they're designed to save money, boost profits for the insurance company at the expense of medical care for the people that are getting these plans. I also worked 3 years in a Medicaid fraud unit, which meant I spent a lot of time in nursing homes, and I saw firsthand the people that were ill and having trouble getting what they needed because of whatever type of insurance they had. So thank you again for what you did for us, but I'd ask this subcommittee not to include any kind of Medicare Advantage plan for any of the employees forever in the future.
Couple more folks. I had John Easton first. John, if you can hear us, we gotta unmute. If not, you got Bob Clark is unmuted, actually. Yeah, Bob, so instead of going to John, should you go to Bob since you got it figured out? Bob. Oh, now there you go. You got it. Give it to Bob.
Hi, I'm Clarkin. I'm retired from the Department of Labor, the best department in state government.
You're gonna start on one here. We don't have to.
First, I'd like to thank Wayne Emsley. Wayne, it's been a privilege over the last couple of months to get to know you and work with you. Thank you very much for your bold motion, and thank you everyone for voting yes, grandfathering us into Medicville. But as Bill Oberly said, our job's not done. And there are a number of us, you can be sure they're going to stay involved. First, we're going to make sure that Medicare Advantage is taken off the table and never, ever, ever be an option for any retired state employee within the near future or the far future. Second, there's a small group of us that are committed to addressing paying the bills and bringing down the liability. And Representative Bombach, if you're still there, I'm going to pester you the next couple of years about how we can use the trust fund, the pension trust fund, as a model for the OPEB trust fund and get to pay the pay-go cost quicker than 2041 or 2052. Third, I've listened to all of the SEBC meetings and the planning and finance committees meetings going back for about a year now. And I've always been impressed with Bill Oberly's crusade that another key point that we have to be aware of is controlling costs. Because, yes, because Delaware is behind the curve at controlling the ever increasing cost of Medicare, of medical treatments that drive the pay-go cost. And fifth, please, when the report's done, could you please send a copy of the report to all the retirees and to every state employee that's going to be retiring within the next 5 years, so that they get to know about the great work of the committee and what your recommendations are. Thank you.
John?
You're still with us, John. I don't know if you're still with us. We're trying to unmute you. And we are not having any luck. You're gonna have to help us out.
Is there sequence he needs to enter?
Just give what I hit the microphone button on the
Yep.
screen and
Yep.
unmute it.
John, if you can hit your microphone, if not, we will certainly accept. Oops. What did we do? Did we lose it? We'll certainly take comments from you there. Oh, there you're muted, John. Go. You're there?
You're muted. I just don't hear anything.
John, perhaps you're *6. If not, we'll move on. Okay. We'll come back, sir, to you. All right. Did that cover everybody?
Yep.
Have everyone that?
Yeah,
Okay, so we gave public comment. You all are certainly allowed to stay. We're gonna continue with a couple items, but I did that out of courtesy for some of you who are in a hot room in the other room. Hopefully everybody continues to be vaccinated. I get a little nervous as a nurse with people on top of each other in a hot room en masse. So I'm trying to, if you're having to leave, you're certainly free to leave. We're gonna continue with some other items. I believe Mr. Wayne, we have another motion, but you certainly are free to go for the second, so. Thank you. With that. I'll let folks leave first. We'll go forward. Other comments from committee members? I think we have another possible motion.
I do, and it does concern Medicare Advantage. In fact, there's two of them. The first one is,
Are you gonna do that one first or this one?
I'm gonna do the one that I didn't write on the paper first. I just wrote it
This is
while I was
dangerous.
here.
Here comes improv.
This is improv.
Improv Wayne. All right.
I
here we
move
go.
that this subcommittee exclude Medicare Advantage as an option to reduce the OPEB liability. So in other words, when it's not, that's the motion. So I guess I'm looking for a second and then I'll explain it a little bit.
And certainly we can bring up the motions from the floor, and if we don't get everything discussed today, we have another meeting where we can, table and come back. Yeah.
I'll second the motions for purposes of
Discussion. Okay, so purpose of the discussion, we have a motion that has been seconded, and for those listening in, Mr. Wayne, if you kindly say it one more time.
Sure. The motion is, I move that the subcommittee exclude Medicare Advantage as an option to reduce the OPEB liability.
It's a little bit vague because I don't know if you're talking immediate or long term.
Well, here's what my explanation is this. We had looked at a number of what are they called? They're combinations and they're called, combo A, combo.
Oh, so you're talking about in our actual report. So I wasn't sure if you were talking about, because we can't do something into perpetuity or constitutionally that affects the General Assembly.
When we look at these combos, that none of the combos in the future will include Medicare Advantage. They come off the.
Well, where are they in here? Which one?
Well, there's.
We only have four. We only have only one, I think. So you made it sound like there were more spots. So let's make sure we're.
Well, there is combo 4. It's also presented. It's also presented on slide 13. Also on slide 14.
So it's combo 4. So we know what we're talking about.
And there's again multiple places in the other slides where it's listed also 13 and 4 slides, 13 and 14 is present.
Summarized on the slide. What was
To
that?
put it in the vernacular, I want to take Medicare Advantage off the table.
Number 2,
Period.
yeah, 2 and 4.
Period, meaning in our.
In our recommendation.
So you're basically wanting to say that when we put forth this report, that we don't have anything in here with Medicare Advantage, that's what you're saying.
Yes, that's correct. The recommendations, which is what we're to do, that was our charge.
Right. Right, go ahead, Representative Bob.
I do want to point out that in the judge's order that stayed the prior plans, it includes a direction that the defendants, which is the state, implementation of Medicare Advantage plans for state retirees and acceptance of enrollment in the plan, is stayed until further order by this court. There is no further orders issued at this point by the court. So I'm going to say your motion seems consistent with the active court order.
And then a question for all of us here present, because again, I think members recognize that we have heard them and why we grandfathered them, but my question, and I am not a lawyer, would be, do we, because I have no problem, right, moving with this and moving it forward and having recommendations that don't have in the current present term, as you're trying to get direction for an RFP in a limited time. Because as was mentioned, we don't have a crystal ball for 10 years or 20 years down the road with Medicare C, and I don't think we can, having served in the legislature, you know, constitutionally, Representative Overly, you know this, we can't. What is that?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead and say what you were saying.
There's always a constitutional question about binding future general assemblies. But I think in the narrow scope, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're suggesting is it relates to the permutations of solutions we might come up with for resolving the OPEB liability, to what extent we do that Medicare Advantage not be considered as one of those factors.
That's correct.
As we make a recommendation, which of course, though, members of the General Assembly or DHR or SEBC may have a difference of opinion. Go ahead, Dave. Correct.
So I'm not aware also, but I mean, why can't we just, if we have an option that includes it, we just vote yes or no on the option? Why do we have to have a motion to do this?
So you'd rather have the modeling in front of you, is what you'd say
If we
before?
don't like it, let's do it as part of that model.
So you would like to table it for now? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess to expedite the modeling process, wouldn't it be easier to factor out the Medicare Advantage component before you do the modeling? The vote on it?
I'm trying to narrow the field.
Right.
I'm trying to get some things out of consideration.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I just want to put my voice in the room on this, because Lieutenant Governor, you know that we're two of the 9 people that were presented with Medicare Advantage as an option, what, 16, 18 months ago.
Well, not
And
just two, I was.
well, you were on the subcommittee. I'm talking about the 9 on the SEBC. You were on the subcommittee. I'm aware because I'm the one that designated.
Yeah, you stuck me.
And you still talk to me, so that's. I've said this more than once, we're in a much different position today than we were back then. We talked about it earlier. We were told that it was the same as Medicville, that it was as similar as possible. But even more importantly, a lot's come out about Medicare Advantage in the last 16 months. Tom Pinoza talked about some of that. And where I'm at today is I can't in good conscience reach a conclusion that Medicare Advantage in any way is a good option for either current or future retirees at this time as it currently exists. And I think, I support Wayne's motion, because I think for the work of this committee, if others agree with me and where I am in terms of that position, to be able to say that we're not going to include it in our report because it's not an acceptable option at this time. I think we should do that to move it out of the way and be able to focus on the work we need to focus on to get to the report by the time we have to get to it. So that's where I am personally.
Represent my.
And I'm gonna just add some of this. I think that, I don't even know now, 14, 15 meetings we've had. I think we spent quite a bit of time looking at Medicare Advantage. Speaking as one subcommittee member, I don't feel like I need another minute to spend on it. And if that indeed is the consequence of passing this motion, count me in. Okay.
Down here, and I would like to give opportunity for those listening in, again, we are an advisory body, Senate Bill 29, for Senate Bill 29. Jeff, your comments were correct, for those of us on SEBC, it was a different kind of understanding, I think we've all learned. Having said that, again, we can hand that to members of the General Assembly. I'm not sure if any or some, and some are present here. I don't know if they're still on and are able to comment at the time. Perhaps they can comment or not. Because again, I don't want to hamstring them and not have something that they were wanting to be able to inform their caucuses or inform members either way. I mean, you know, it's easy for us to sit here. Is that Representative or Senator Townsend? I hear a voice.
Ron, I just wanted to ask a clarifying
Yeah.
question. So are we saying that the report that goes out, we're not going to show the work that the committee has done to pull up information about Medicare Advantage and all of the data associated with that work? Or are we just saying that the committee's not supporting a recommendation for Medicare Advantage? I'm not sure I'm following which one of those it is, or if it's both.
Right, and I'll let Paul speak, and then I'll follow up with what he doesn't say.
Yes, Secretary Kate, I think it's a great question. Again, as I'm interpreting Mr. Emsley's motion, it's no more time spent on it. Everything that we've done for the past 15 weeks, including an awful lot of analysis of options, including Medicare Advantage, is in the public record, is in the record of this subcommittee. But I think if this motion is passed, it means the subcommittee will not spend any time, for instance, when drafting the report, saying, well, let's consider, one of the things that we want the SEBC to consider is this one thing that has this flavor of Medicare Advantage. That's off the table. We're not erasing history. We're not erasing the analysis that's been done, which includes analysis of Medicare Advantage options. That'd be how I would, that's my attempt to answer your question.
So long story short, it would be in the appendices. What did you say?
Yeah, I'm not sure I follow. I understand. I appreciate you trying to. I don't understand.
Here's how I interpreted what he said. We have to include in our report, we would need to include, I think, in appendices, some of these analyses, because again, I don't have Senator Townsend or Senator Pettyjohn or Representative Ramon or others have thoughts. Again, I think it's very obvious that at this point in time, in this moment of, August 2023 going forward, that there are strong opinions that we are not in a group consensus about Medicare Advantage. But I also know we are making a report, not to even SEBC, we're making a report to the General Assembly, to the governor on our viewpoint. And we would hope that SEBC, and when the RFP and others go out, they would take into consideration what we've discussed. I would certainly hope that would be the case. So we have to include what we've done to this point.
Right.
It could be in an appendix or whatever. When we issue a report, it would be silly not to show some of the work that has been done so that people have a full analysis.
Yeah, I just, that's, again, I guess the devil's in details is that what that report looks like and how you adhere to this motion and still tell that story. And so that would be really my question. I don't necessarily know that there's complete clarity on that just yet.
Okay. And again, we are not a binding committee, but we're advisory. And I think, with the staff, where we're going to spend our time on the L, the N, the G, the 1%.
Yeah, that's fine. It will spend the committee will spend their time, but there was a comment that will be reflected in the report, and that's where I'm getting hung up at. So if the conversation is going forward, the modeling that we want to do, we don't want to include Medicare Advantage as an option. I hear that motion, but there was also a comment about it in the report and not being addressed in the report or showing the analysis that went.
I got you. So we'll let Jeff come back. Jeff.
And it's Ron, if it was me, my intent was that the report will not contain a recommendation moving Medicare Advantage forward. I understand what you're saying. We have to acknowledge the conversation, but that at this point, I just don't see personally Medicare Advantage as an acceptable option. And I would hope that, like Paul said, we won't spend 1 second more. We'll focus on the other work. Does that help?
Jeff, it's Claire DeMattias. You said it earlier in the meeting that the plans L and N really aren't a favorable option for pensioners because of their cost. And so a reason to include an RFP that would include an option among 2 Medicare supplement plans and a Medicare Advantage plan is because those Medicare supplement plans that have been modeled price a lot of pensioners out of being able to afford their buy-in to participate in state-sponsored healthcare. So the overwhelming reason to include Medicare Advantage, whether you like the coverage or not, is the choice option. There are some pensioners who, number one, may want a Medicare Advantage plan because of the coverage, and the coverage is good, but also because they can afford it, where they may not be able to afford the Medicare supplement choice plans.
So Claire, I was looking at the costs that were on that page, and the concern is somebody made a decision to move the employee share to 15% from the current 5%. And then there was also the buy-up that was done. I'm hoping that by getting more information, we can look at a broader picture and maybe come to a point where L, N, or G, whatever the coverage is, we're providing people with as close as possible to the current medic fill. I know it's not going to be identical under a cost structure that is also not shifting the cost from the plan to the retiree. So I want to make clear that my comment about cost was the one page we were given, and there were some assumptions that were made there, like the 15% rather than 5%, and the buy-up costs that were just made for us and not the result of our work product. I mean,
Representative Oberle?
That's a big change. That's a big change. If you're not going to go with a modeling of 15%, that really changes the dynamic of what we're talking about. So I would hope that we're going to look at what those costs to the state look like, because the reason that Medicare supplement choice plans that we were looking at helped to get us there in a fiscally sustainable way is because we modeled it at 15%. So if you're suggesting we're going to remodel it at 5%, I think we need to look at that.
Representative Oberle, then we'll go to Senator Pettyjohn, whose hand's been up.
We've yet to discuss that. I mean,
Right.
that's a discussion that we had in the future in terms of the state share. And the employee share.
Senator Pettyjohn, and then Secretary Geisenberger. Senator
Thank you, Madam
Pettyjohn.
Chair. I'm not a big supporter of the Medicare Advantage plan, especially how this was going to have been rolled out if the General Assembly, if we hadn't have stepped in. That being said, taking the discussion completely about Medicare Advantage off the table in our final report that's going to go to the rest of the policymakers and decision makers in the General Assembly, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I think we should at least summarize all of the options that were on the table so that, again, I'm one of 62 members of the General Assembly. There are 4 members of the General Assembly on this committee out of 62. I think that we need to make sure that we are passing along all of the options so that a final determination can be made. Withdrawing Medicare Advantage completely from any of the recommendations leaves out a critical piece of the discussion that we've spent so much time talking about. We can absolutely show the pros and cons of Medicare Advantage, and I hope that once they're all presented, the members of the General Assembly that may actually end up voting on this are able to digest that information. But I think taking any option that includes Medicare Advantage out of our final report, I think is removing that key piece of information, and honestly, one of the reasons why we have this committee in the first place.
And you're talking in preference to future retirees, because you obviously already voted to grandfather current retirees.
Yep.
And I appreciate that. I know you're one of the leaders in the Senate, and that's why, again, tricky place to be. Secretary Geisenberger.
So, I mean, I would second what Senator Pettyjohn said. But, overall, I feel like we're spending a lot of time talking about what we're going to take off the table before we've actually voted to put anything on the table. And as a committee, I think this committee was formed to make recommendations on what we should do. And it seems like all of our focus today has been on what we shouldn't do. I don't think that advances the mission of this committee. I might be perfectly happy to vote in favor of taking this off the table if I knew what we were going to put on the table, what we were actually going to do instead. And we've not had those discussions. We haven't voted for anything in this committee so far in terms of what we're going to do to actually address this challenge. So I hope that's what we turn our attention to. And then we can come back to this.
And Commissioner Navarro, your hands up.
Yes, I think Denise had her hand up, so I didn't mean to cut in front of her, but I'll just say that to Tom Panosa's point about Medicare Advantage and the fraud that has been surrounding this program, he's absolutely right. I mean, it is a real problem across the country, not just here in Delaware. And I commend Bryce Delaware for the research and their resilience and I guess their stick-togetherness for this. But the data is and the research is spot on, but there are some flaws in what they're reporting and telling everyone, right? I mean, I will say that I even penned an op-ed years ago to warn consumers about these types of plans and buyer beware, essentially, know what you're buying. But the research, I have to just say that, as I'm sure you all know, there are several Medicare Advantage products offered by various commercial companies. And as with all lines of insurance, there are minimal options that are affordable, right? That have high copays, high deductibles, but always have limited coverage. And I refer to those as the Yugo plans, the cheap cars, the no-frill cars. And essentially you get what you pay for. And that's why earlier when we're looking at the Medigap graphs was so relatable because, if you buy these cheap plans, you're going to have no coverage, right? So, and these cheaper plans are essentially the most problematic plans with the well-documented nightmares that we've all read about. So these are the most popular, but they don't cover anything. So you could find those, very inexpensive. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the option to purchase the Cadillac plans that have a robust coverage with little to no deductibles and copays, but they're very, very expensive. So I'll just say you get what you pay for. And I think that it would be the best option to offer options for people. To Claire's point, this may not be affordable for everyone. And to Jeff's point, I'm one of the 3 people who are on the SEBC. And when we originally voted for this plan, we were informed that the plan was essentially the same as the current Medicare plan. We were told that, this was, again, the same, and the process was not dissimilar to how the SEBC determines TPAs for active employees, right? So the RFP process was not secret. No one was trying to pull any wool over anyone's eyes. So that despite what some people said was an unfair practice, I can't speak for the entire SEBC, but this was never on the table somehow to pull over a fast one on retirees. So like other members on the task force, I've received dozens of emails from retirees who are asking us to vote no on MA plans. And I've read every single one of them. And I've replied to the ones that were personalized, not just sort of cut and paste messages. But I just want to say that I believe the best course of action is to offer options for retirees. Basically, if you don't want the plan, don't opt for it. And it's my hope that the state at some point would offer some sort of ombudsman style service for retirees who can help them determine what's best for them, their budgets and their families. So our department, the DOI, offers a program called DMAP, and it's the Delaware Medicare Assistance Bureau. And it's for people who are turning 65 and going on Medicare. This is a federally funded plan that has been very successful. I think if the General Assembly would fund a similar state program, that I would offer our office as a resource to work with the SBO. But I have to stress that the state would have to fund that because we don't have the staff and neither does the SBO. But I just think that the best thing at this point is to offer options. Thank you.
In offering options that would be including the MA is what you're saying, just so that I'm clear. Because I'm trying to get a sense from the committee if we have consistency here today or not. I mean, we don't have to all kumbaya.
It's good.
Right.
Denise is here, yeah, go ahead.
So, the plan that the state offers now is what I would consider a Cadillac plan, not the Eagle plan.
All right, thank you for that. We'll go to Denise, then Representative Lilly.
We have talked about this Medicare Advantage till we're all blue in the face. And yes, we need to have options, but Medicare Advantage should not be an option. We have 100% of the people that have voiced their opinions, sent emails that do not want this. Not even one person has said, well, maybe I should consider it. And I've said this before. We need to take it off the table. It should not be a choice. We have plenty of other choices that we can work with within our state, within our budget. Taking Medicare Advantage, it needs to come off. And we are spending too much time on this negative. And we need to move forward. So I know we keep saying the same thing over and over again, but and I know it was brought up that there are people that Medicare Advantage, they want it because they can afford it. Well, I think there's options out there that they can afford so they can get the coverage they need if they're not in state. So we need to work on this, but we need to take Medicare Advantage off the table. It's so obvious. It's the elephant in the room.
Representative Overly?
I get a sense there might be.
Well, because it's time.
Yeah,
Discussion.
but I mentioned earlier in the meeting that there's nothing that precludes a state employee today purchasing a Medicare Advantage plan. And I don't know what purpose it serves to have the state formally offer a Medicare Advantage plan when they already have the choice, if they so choose to move in that direction. So that I'm a little confounded by all this.
Have that in the time. Well, what the sense that I'm getting, since we have torn, I don't know if everybody's spoken. I don't know if Senator Townsend there to speak or not at this time, but the sense that I'm getting in the time that where we are, and I think with Wayne, perhaps we've been very mindful. This has been a very thoughtful group, and I appreciate that. And we're not going to stymie, because when we come together at the next meeting, hopefully we're going to have L and N and G up to make a vote on. I mean, it would be great to have a vote on that, to look at the 1%. I want to get this done too, but Wayne, I'm getting a little bit of discomfort from some of the folks at this point, and I would rather have an opportunity to get a little more backdrop and information. I very, 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 very clearly hear the community that has spoken here today does not want Medicare Advantage considered, at least not now, and for some it's forever. That has been very much heard. But I also hear some questions and some concern from leaders and folks in our General Assembly who are going to have to address this, and from both sides. So I'd like to maybe consider.
And that's fine, but at the next meeting, I'd like those
Have that
to advocate for it being a formal offering by the state. Those advocating that, to defend that position, because it makes no sense to me when it's already available. Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just 2 seconds.
Yes, go ahead.
He's right. Anyone can go and purchase these plans. They're commercial plans. If you bought a plan similar to what the state is offering, it would be out of people's price range. To Denise's point, the state's plan is not a commercial plan, and all of the negativity you've heard and read about about commercial plans, and in most cases are the least cost, low coverage MA plans. So there's no harm in offering options.
Yeah, that's just so Wayne, given where we are, thoughts for the moment. I know you guys Nancy, you were back at the store. She used to do that years ago.
She was always one of my favorites.
I was in trouble back there, now getting me in trouble. All right. So Wayne for now.
Perhaps we should look at this in the next meeting.
The next meeting, so table for now, is that your request? So we have a motion to table for now, lay it on the table.
Motion on the table.
Lay it on the table for now, but thank you for bringing that today. Yes, motion has been made to table the motion. We can go around, have the vote.
And that's a motion, table the current motion.
Yes.
And you made the motion.
No.
correct?
I did. I'm not sure what's the second.
There's
I think
second.
waiting for a second.
All right, so we'll start with Director Kate.
So can I ask what we're voting on?
So okay, we are voting on tabling the motion. A yes means you're tabling the motion.
Just go by it, please.
I vote to table.
All right, we can do a voice vote too. I mean, all in favor of tabling the motion, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Whoops. Any nays? That's how we all feel. All right. Any abstentions? Abstention, yeah, abstention, right, abstention, okay, abstention.
I also want to be clear, it's not voting.
No, abstention. Not voting, all right. Okay. All right.
Madam
Now,
Chair.
you will-
Denise
yes,
has-
go ahead. The motion was successful, it has been laid on the table. Okay, properly voiced, but any other thoughts or comments? Denise, I'm sorry.
I'm just gonna say, I just don't understand why we keep putting this off.
Right.
I'm just gonna leave it at that. But this is just unbelievable that we continue to keep putting this off.
Okay. All right, well, I appreciate your comments for now, and I think, whether it's this motion or another similar motion, right? So we can probably package it maybe a little differently when we get it together on the 24th. Shall we be sending out our September meetings? Because we are going to be in a different location too, so for the next meeting, I know Kristen is stayed on.
The next meeting's gonna be DOI.
Yeah, DOI, Department of Insurance, in 2 weeks, if there are any other comments from anyone, yes, Representative Bamba. We can have your attention, please, we still are in the middle of our meeting, Representative Bamba.
So I have a list of what I'd like to see us do, and in some cases, which are things that should be, I think, done by the next meeting. I think we should formally request that the RFP, when it is finalized, is provided to this subcommittee. I would like to see and perhaps have the subcommittee give input on what metrics are within the RFP that the SEBC will use in order to select plan or plans from those that are received. I think that we should, and this does not need to be done by the 24th. But I think on our short list of follow-up actions, we should either prepare or identify who should prepare a formal plan on addressing the OPEB funding that was discussed as having a written plan is something that will be very important for the bond rating agencies. Both on the funding level, their plan design changes, eligibility, et cetera, but developing a formal plan likely to be adjusted over time. Next thing is, and this is where I said the plan choices is that we need to get that done this month in order to have in the RFP, but we also need to come up with recommendations to the SEBC of the items such as how are we grandfathering? Are we changing the percent share that the retirees pay? Those issues need to be done not by August 31st, but we as a subcommittee, I think, are obligated to address those and come up with recommendations. Then we need to start addressing the pre-Medicare age retirees and that's where we're going to need, I think, new analysis and really go into stuff. But thankfully, it will all be having nothing to do with Medicare supplement or any other thing that begins the word Medicare. And we also need to decide the OEC recommendation. Is it, 0.25% each time? Is it just go to 1% and stay there? we do need to address that, and that's separate. And that's why that's later down the list. We've got some that we need to do next meeting. And frankly, I would have liked to have had some things off the table, so we had less to consider, but apparently we're gonna be looking at all.
One other thing I'd like to come back to, I think I raised the issue a couple meetings ago, that, you know, what is the level? Is it 80%? Is it 75%? I mean, it's been a fluid,
We recommend if you're 80%, I know certainly our cabinet secretaries and others like the 100%.
You know, we keep coming back to that, but you know, is 80% the target?
I think that's what we agreed to. We voted to agree, but it's not perfect. I know certainly our secretaries want it to
Now,
be
I've heard, you know, 87 today, 84.
Yeah, but we did vote, but we can hopefully get there with other mechanisms because it's not all been fully included. So I think between
It's reality versus wishful thinking.
design, eligibility, the funding,
And
we can get there.
it's not clear whether the 80% is just to be addressed as Medicare age retirees. Or if if the 80% is once we also start and finish recommendations for the pre-Medicare age retirees.
Understood.
So fun.
If I can just comment on what Paul just said.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
You know, from the rating agency perspective, you know, as was pointed out by, you know, in our last meeting.
You're really breaking up. Shoot.
Sound like Darth Vader.
God, Rick, you sound like Darth Vader. We can't hear you. Shoot. If you're able to communicate in chat, I don't know if you're in a position where you are to do so. We would certainly take your comments. Secretary doesn't realize he doesn't even know. Shoot. Secretary, we cannot hear you. Shoot.
Madam Chair, can we assume that maybe for once he was going to agree with whatever Representative Bomback had said?
I second that motion.
On that voting.
All right. I don't know, maybe Secretary or Cabinet Secretary Saran, I know Representative Ramon's hands up. I feel bad. I think he just got kicked off. We'll have to ask him real quickly. He was saying, Representative Ramon or Saran, was your hand up, Secretary?
No, I was just saying that I totally disagreed that he was about to agree with Paul.
Yeah, I have a feeling there you are correct, sir. Representative Ramon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to put out two really important things. I think number one, I'm not undermining all the research that has been done by the estimations and so forth and the path forward. But when this first started, about a year ago, I guess in one of our first town halls at Goldie Beacom, there was a point brought up of questioning certain aspects of the consistency and accuracy of the estimate and the estimators' use of certain information that's definitely been changed since COVID and forward moving. In other words, average life expectancy, is it still getting longer? Is it getting shorter? Was it a bleep of COVID? There were so many topics that I think shooting for 100%, I think is a little bit unrealistic. I think there's a point at which we're going to top out on that estimate, and shooting at 80 to 85 or something like that is probably a more realistic number, because we can always modify this if we're off. You always make plans and you always do this stuff with the concept of knowing it's going to change. We don't have to have it perfect right out of the gates, and we're in a mode of negotiating, trying to make everything realistic, and I just think it's unrealistic to go further than that. More importantly, with all this discussion, I absolutely understand the apprehension of and the frustration and the, let me say, lack of maybe comfort with not just saying, look, we're not going to do this, we're taking that off the table, we're going to do that. I get that, and I understand why, but what we are presenting is just the recommendation, and I do caution that we don't give a recommendation that just gets discounted and thrown and dusted away in a somewhere never used. We want something that's realistic and well thought out. And to conclude, I think what got us into this mess, and I surely don't want to offend anyone, and I don't mean to be critical, but the public doesn't react well to surprises. And we delivered inordinate surprises in things that are extremely important to people throughout their lives that I think we could have done a better job, all of us, of education and engagement well before that first meeting in somewhere before the election last year. What I would ask is, whatever we do, we aren't the kings, we aren't the queens. We are here trying to do the research and the work to be honest, open, and inclusive of everything we can, but continue to deliver information in a way that no one is surprised, because there's always going to be someone who's upset. And I think much to your credit, Madam Chair, I see you focusing on that, and I'm very grateful. And obviously, you know, I'm not running for governor or anything else, but I do think you're handling this very well for the public, even though you go through moments of frustration, and I appreciate that. So please, can we continue to post and communicate and not surprise people? And more importantly, understand that the estimates at the beginning may be different than the estimates we get each year as we go through this on what the true costs are and, you know, what our number needs to be. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, anybody else? I don't think our secretary guys have ever.
So I
Oh, here he
apologize.
is.
Are you able to hear me
He's
now?
back. You were Darth Vader. You sounded just like him. Okay, go ahead. Now we can hear you clearly.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
So what I was trying to do is respond to something that Representative Bomback said about is the target, whatever the target is, 80%, 85%, 100% of ADC, is it all of the pieces combined? And the answer is that yes, it is. It's, you know, it's the pre-Medicare, it's the funding, it's any design changes, it's, you know, any eligibility changes, all of those combined, not, you know, not trying to get there through one vehicle, whether it's people on Medicare, people pre-Medicare, future retirees. It's all of them combined is what the target is, and that's how the rating agencies look at it. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that insight. Any other comments? Yes, Dr. Maddow.
Lieutenant Governor, if I could, before we entertain a motion to adjourn, I just want to share with subcommittee members that the Benefits Office and the Office of Pensions have partnered, and we will be dropping in the mail to State of Delaware retirees. And benefit eligible retirees that will not include University of Delaware retirees because they are not in a state pension plan.
Right.
We are dropping a newsletter in the mail next week, August 15th. That newsletter has been posted on the Office of Pensions website today, and I will follow up and I will share a link to that newsletter with the subcommittee so that you can review that. Our goal is to try moving forward to do this at-home mailed newsletter at least twice a year to help keep our retirees aware of changes and updates. This particular newsletter highlights specifically the State Employee Benefits Committee's votes with regards to the Medicare premiums and prescription copay changes that will go into effect on January 1 of 2024. So that will be included along with some background information on the work of the State Employee Benefits Committee. So thank you for letting me share that.
Great, thank you for that. All right, wow, well, so we know where to go. Thank you for doing a 3-hour meeting today. If we have a motion, yes, go ahead.
Do we have the September meeting date?
We are going to have September meetings. We have to confirm. Yeah,
We need to circulate
Yes.
dates and availability, so we will.
we'll do that ASAP. Yes, and Representative Everly.
Madam,
Yes, Representative Bone.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Can you, I did not hear, is that also going to include only current retirees or like people who may be retiring within the next year or two or so forth? Because I think it's just as urgent of information for them. I didn't really hear who the target that was getting the mailer was other than not UAD.
Representative Ramon, it will be sent to all benefit eligible retirees, State of Delaware retirees. It will not be mailed to active employees who may be eligible for retirement. However, the newsletters will always be posted online. And we can certainly make reference to those newsletters in the benefits bulletin that is mailed monthly or emailed that is monthly to active state of Delaware employees.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. I just was
Sure,
worried
great.
about those soon to retire, so thank you.
All right, and Wayne had his hand up and then we're gonna run out. Nope, Representative Overly, yes.
One of the things I'm a little unclear about, and I'm not advocating for additional meetings, but how do you foresee this committee, once we've gotten over the hump of this retiree issue and future retiree issue? I mean, do you foresee this moving forward? I mean, Senate Bill 29, I think, contemplates that we stay active.
I think there is a contemplation to that, and I'll certainly later, I think what we can do is we get through the hump, hopefully sooner than later.
Right.
We can then reevaluate and talk with the bill sponsors and.
Because I'll be honest with you, if I were still a sitting legislator, I'd find comfort in having a committee like this functioning and acting as a resource and providing guidance. I think I've served on a lot of committees over my life, but I think this is probably one of the more important ones to serve on.
We'll take that in consideration into notes. All right. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Motion adjourned. Second. Motion is given in second for adjournment. Hearing all in favor, signal by saying aye. Aye. All right. And I have got.
Aye.